and ask Lena for a roll call, please.
Sure. Member Bovan.
Member Bajaj is present.
Oh, I'm sorry, Bajaz. I apologize. That was your first name, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I apologize.
Thank you.
Member Karzan.
Present.
Member Eller. Member Eller. Okay. Member Funabashi.
Happy New Year, everyone. I'm here.
Mm-hmm. Member Gaddis.
Here.
Member Hannon.
Here.
Member Kilroy. Member Kilroy.
Kilroy isn't here.
Member Lamb.
Here.
Member Light.
Present.
Member McKenzie.
Present.
Member Moses. Member Nafisi. I believe I see her here. Member Nafisi.
Here.
Member Pinsler.
Here.
Member Samaras.
Here.
Member Sanchez.
Here.
Member Simpson.
I am here.
Member Solomon.
Here.
Member Stoddard. Member Szymanski.
Here.
Member Turner. Member Voicey. Member Voicey. I see
Here.
your name. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And Member Waller.
Member Eller's here.
Okay, yes. Or Member Eller. Okay, Member Eller, are you here now? Okay.
I'm here.
And then is Member Waller here? I think I see his name. Brad, are you here?
He is muted. There he is. No, he's muted.
Ah,
I see him.
I'm having some technical difficulties, but Member Waller is here.
Great.
And
Yeah,
hopefully
let's
you'll
work,
be picture soon.
let's work it out right now. And then Chair Bureau.
Here.
Great.
Thank you, Lena. Please join me in the salute to the flag. So please rise and join me in the salute to the flag. The Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States
United States of America.
and to the
And to
republic
the republic
for which
for which
it
it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation
nation, under God, indivisible, with
with liberty and
justice.
justice for all.
Thank you. Order of the agenda. Does anybody wish to change anything around or suggest something, or can I get a motion to approve the order of the agenda?
So approved. Moved to approve.
Second.
So we got to, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? So ordered. We have the consent of the calendar. We have, let's see, any, I guess there was no comments on the meeting minutes from our last meeting, excluded consent calendar items and non-agenda items. Do we have something?
Or actually, well, on consent calendar, it looks like, does Member Solomon have a comment on either, on consent, there's affidavit of posting and last time's minutes?
I would just, thank you, Lena. I would just abstain from voting on approving the minutes as I wasn't present at the last meeting.
Okay.
Thank you, Member Solomon. Okay, so
Yeah, is there any other comments on either of the consent calendar items? Or otherwise, then we can entertain a motion?
So moved.
okay.
Second.
Second.
All right. Are there any opposed? Member Solomon abstains on the minutes. Are there any opposed to the consent calendar? Okay. Okay. So it looks like the motion passes, Chair.
Thank you. Public hearings. We have none.
We have none.
Items continued from our previous agenda. So we're going back to meeting 23. This is 23B. Let's go ahead and get started with the presentation.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. Sean Scully, Planning Manager. I hope you can hear me all right. The mass situation at the house requires it, so we'll see how it goes. I'm going to need a little help running the show from Hallie. Thank you, Hallie. She's going to put up the PowerPoint, and I'll just cue you, Hallie, on the next slide. So this is meeting 23B. This focus of the meeting is goals and policies review for our conservation element. And as you all know, we'll also run through the element in its entirety and go through some comments. Next slide. So a couple of housekeeping items, and Lena, I might need your help here a little bit, but everything kind of funnels through Lena, technically speaking. The virtual protocol for GPAC, I mean, we've done this a couple times, same as before. Mute yourselves during the presentation, encourage you to turn on your cameras, raise your hand button under the reaction icon, and you'll be invited to speak. These are kind of working meetings, or these are, so, if something comes up, feel free, and we can entertain, a question or comment as we go. We would like you to hold them if you could for a pause, or until we get to the group discussion as well. That'd probably be preferred, but as we go, we can also entertain some questions and comments. And then you can mute and unmute yourself as usual. Next slide. And this is for the public comment. And Lena, you monitor this as we go, correct?
That's correct. As of this point, we don't. We have one member of the public signed up to speak. We'll have 3 e-comments that I'll read at that point, and but I'll monitor it. I'll continue to monitor it as the meeting goes on.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Lena. Next slide. So here's our agenda, just running through quickly. We've already gone through, and we're down into items continued from the previous agenda. Again, it's our review and recommendation on the goals and policies for the conservation element and the entirety of the element. So like we did last time, when we get through each set of goals and policies, I'll turn it over to the chairman, Nick, and there'll be discussions as warranted, and then you'll vote on the group of policies for the set of policies under that goal, and then we'll move on to the next set. And those 3 for conservation elements, so a little bit less than last time. And then we'll go through the whole element, and we're working. We have our working copy that is the product of committee member Light's hard work. And we've also gotten some other comments. We'll introduce those as we go, but that's our working draft. And then items for discussion, presentation, action, none. Public comments, we have an opportunity for that, but it's not on the agenda here, but actually we had been in the practice of having comments from the public at the front end and the back end, but since we don't have anybody, correct, Lena, on non-agenda items?
Correct. We don't have anybody for non-agenda.
Okay. And then we have a few items from staff, next steps, and then any referrals from this group, and then we can adjourn the meeting. Next slide. So nothing on this item. We can go to the next slide. So just a couple of announcements and updates. The general plan progress in 2020 and 2021, and it should say 2022 too. So we have the vulnerability assessment and the safety element. We're just getting our first draft completed of the safety element. We already have our vulnerability assessment draft. We're taking that to the Public Safety Commission the very end of the month. So after that, it'll be in the package of documents that comprise the updated general plan that'll come ultimately to this body and then on to the Planning Commission and City Council. The housing element, ongoing, state is reviewing. As a matter of fact, about 2 hours before this meeting, we received their comments on our adopted housing element. A little bit of work to do with them. I don't know if Brandy wants to make a statement on this matter, but it won't come to this body, but you'll be hearing about the work.
Yeah, it does impact a little bit the comments and how we need to adapt the housing based on their comments. They did not just outright certify the housing element. But what it does impact our timing as far as moving some of the other elements of the general plan forward. We can still work on the land use goals and policies, and we will, get those, start looking at scheduling that. However, what it does impact is the full build out analysis that triggers the environmental review of the land use plan. So we're just in a little bit of limbo, probably in the next month or two, in getting that finalized with the housing element and being able to move forward with the environmental.
Great, thank you, Brandy. And then as Brandy kind of segued into land use goals and policies discussions, will start in March. And we, based on some of what Brandy just said, timelines may be compressed and may need to be compressed. So just to put it on your radar, the time between meetings of the review of the element and the goals and policies for land use might be much shorter than typical. So every couple of weeks. So just to get that on everybody's radar, and we'd have 3 meetings to go through it. So next slide, please. So here's future meetings. It's we're targeting March 2022 for goals and policy review for land use element, and then continuing that later in March and April as well. Then just some farther out items. I have to move something here. Okay. The final document review, including implementation measures in the summer of next year. You'll have noise and safety element, open space and conservation element, of course, and land use element. And then a community meeting where the final draft document goals and policies later in the summer, fall of this year. And then we're on to Planning Commission and City Council adoption hearings, hopefully starting in fall, maybe, that's our target. And then a citywide vote and Coastal Commission review, spring 2023. A lot of this is getting driven, and I think Brandy wants to speak a little bit.
Yeah, this is the ideal schedule in order for us to get to this being a ballot measure next spring. We're trying to push for that and meet all of that, but as I mentioned, some of our components are really going to be reliant on when the HCD finalizes the housing element, which drives our land use plan and what we can evaluate environmentally. So this is the most aggressive schedule for us to shoot for that. And I think we want to keep moving towards this goal. And regardless if we don't hit the spring 2023, because there's just so many things that have to be in line, by December, we have to have it, the ballot measure already submitted to the clerk. So there's so much that has to happen. But, if we're moving towards this goal, even if we don't hit that spring 2023, perhaps we can, there's another election in that year that might be able to accommodate that.
All right. Thank you, Brandy. Next slide, please. So we've talked about this already. This is tonight's purpose and format, same format as last time. And we do have a couple of items we've had some additional comments submitted by committee member Sheila Lamb and Jim Hannon. So those we'll work those in. into the conversation when we get to the goals and policies. Again, we'll be working on that working draft. Hallie will have that up and in real time, making edits as we go through it. Before we dive in, for the benefit of maybe those watching, certainly not going to spend as much time nearly on background, but just a slide or two on community input, the Parks and Rec Commission input, GPAC work to date, and then just one slide that kind of recaps all the good work we did on at our last meeting on the open space goals and policies.
John, if I can interrupt you for a second.
Yeah, sure.
We have a couple of questions. Member Pinsler, and I believe we have a question from
Paul.
There's Member Pinsler.
Brandy, I just want you to check and make sure, because I believe in our charter, a vote like this has to be at a city election. It cannot be in any other. So if it doesn't happen in 23, it happens in 25.
Yeah, we are working with that, evaluating that with the city attorney and the city clerk's office. But again, that's why we're really trying, plus we want to complete this process. So we are moving towards that. Unfortunately, we're a bit subjected to external forces. So I appreciate everybody's efforts in just hunkering down on these last few meetings to get our work completed. So, but thank you, Bob.
And I believe Member Moses had a question too.
Yeah, Brandy, I was just wondering what aspect of the housing element was rejected.
We just, it's not that it was rejected. They have additional information that they are requesting of the city to clarify some various, various points in that. So it's, a variety of different things, from sites to some of the initiatives or programs.
Yeah, the programs, yes.
So they haven't approved or rejected it yet?
Right.
Okay.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So again, 3 votes on what we're going to get into for conservation, goals and policies, and then 1 for the entirety of the element. You can go ahead. Thank you. So real quick, just a high level. We went really deep on this last time, but just a summary of the background, the community input, Parks and Rec, and GPAC. We had a community survey online, August 2018. That was very successful. We got 664 responses. That helped shape some of the early conversations on the element. The Parks and Rec Commission met in March of 2020, and they looked at the very first draft that we developed, the December 11th, 2019 first draft. They had very few comments, and the few comments they did, we rolled them into this version. And then we had the GPAC members only survey in summer 2020. And in total, GPAC meetings, there have been 7 concerning open space and conservation, some lighter than others, 3 very in-depth meetings that we had, including our last meeting, 23A. Next slide. So open space goals, this is a slide, this summarizes everything we did last time. I'm not gonna go into any detail on it, but we really got to work on every one of the goals. We added language to numerous policies, and they're all listed out here. We identified numerous implementation measures, which is extremely helpful, gives us a real head start on the work ahead. And in fact, added a number of policies. We added 2 policies, new policies, to the open space high quality goal OS2, high quality open spaces and recreational facilities. And then added a whole new goal and a number of policies, 5 policies on prominent public viewpoints in the city, which I think is a really big step and really valuable for the city moving forward. So really just wanted to mention that, and again, congratulate this body on that work and how much we accomplished how much better the document turned out from when we started. So great job on that. Hopefully we can keep that rolling. So next slide. This is, okay, so a couple of items. The Redondo Beach Unified School District reached out to us, in particular concerning policy OS 1.7. Dan Elder, one of the board members, who's actually the legislative representative of the Board of Education. And he's asked to join the meeting and just have a discussion on this item in particular. And what this slide does, and I know Dan is out there now, this basically has the policy plus the bullet items of what this group, GPAC, came up with concerning this policy. In terms of a slight addition, we added the Beach Cities Health District to this policy, and then some implementation measures, and they're identified in bullets on here. So if it pleases the chair, I'd like to turn it over to you to recognize Dan Elder.
Yes, please. Thank you, Dan, for joining us.
Dan, you can go ahead. Dan, are you there? Dan.
And we wanted Dan to join us before we dove into the work we have tonight. And this is on a policy from our last meeting.
Could I ask something, please?
Yes, maybe.
Why is this appearance any different from any other public member?
Well, I think it's an agency. I
don't think that makes a difference. This is a public response to an issue. So therefore, they should be limited to 3 minutes unless we decide to do it. It should be done during the time of public comment.
Can anyone hear me now?
Hold on a second, Dan. I think we have some parliamentary procedure items here. I don't see why we can't make an exception at this point to do this. But if we want to take a quick vote to see if we can do this and accept comment from a member of the school board and perhaps Beach Cities Health District as well.
Be careful, Nick.
So move.
Be careful.
Chair Bureau.
Yes, sir.
I think contrary to Member Penzler's point, considering that RBUSD would be asked to be a primary stakeholder or a partner in this, I feel like wouldn't they have then the ability to present their views on this?
There have been stakeholders previously that we have not included, including members of bicycle groups, people from North Redondo Business Association. There are plenty of groups. There are plenty of people who are involved in these things. However, in order to keep this proper, they are not members of this organization, of this group. Therefore, they are members of the public, no matter who they represent. Therefore, they have to be under the same rules as you would find with any other public entity.
Okay, so
when the time comes for public comment, or if you want to make a motion for something and then have public comment, again, limited to 3 minutes, they can do it.
all right, so for expediting this, I'll make the motion that we split the public comment time into two sections, as we used to do in the past. We had some at the beginning of the meeting, some at the end. I'm going to make a motion that we split the time into two 15-minute segments, and we take up 15 minutes right now and limit the comments to 3 minutes each. And that's my motion.
So move. So second.
We have a second. Can we have raised hands for all those in favor, please?
Can you clarify, please, Nick, that you're making a motion for public comment to occur now and for Mr. Elder's comments to be limited to 3 minutes?
Yes, that's what we're splitting the 30 minutes that we grant for public comment into 2 segments, 15 minutes now and 50 minutes at the end of the meeting. And we're going to allow each person that wants to speak right now to 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you for clarification.
And we have a motion, a second, we have a vote. Lena, could we please have a check of our votes?
Yes, so if everyone can use their raise hand function, it's at the bottom of your screen for Zoom. So right now it looks like we have 18 raised hands, 19.
Okay.
So we have 20.
Okay.
So it looks like 20 yes.
And
then can everyone that voted yes now lower your hand? Okay, and then can the no's and anyone voting no? Okay, anyone else voting no?
all right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
So let's take public comment now for 15 minutes and limit each speaker for 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Dan, go ahead.
Sure, sorry. So I serve on the Board of Education, previously served on the Planning Commission and been following GPAC. I really appreciate all the work everyone has put into this. I know how long this has taken. I'm really here more informally tonight just to hear and answer questions you might have. We saw that this was proposed, and for many of the schools are the hearts of our community. So I'm excited to find more ways to work closely with the city on ways we can serve all of everyone in our community. But I'd kind of like to understand more of what everyone's looking for. So one thing we have to keep in mind is the primary purpose of our schools are to serve our students. So unfortunately, local property taxes don't go to our schools, they go to the state, and then they're really distributed based on the student attendance and need. So it's really number of students and their need, whether they're English language learners, poverty level, things like that. Whereas school bonds and parcel taxes do go directly to local schools. But just wanted to highlight that because a lot of people don't know how that funding mechanism works. We do have a lot of great partnerships with the city, such as the REC program, which provides after school care for students. That's a fantastic offering, wildly popular. We work with community recreational sports programs like ASO and Little League, other community organizations like Beach Cities Health District. They provide a variety of programs in our schools to promote healthy lifestyles. During the pandemic, they've been crucial. So just trying to understand what's being proposed here, because we do have recreational use of a lot of school facilities for organized use. But I think what may be talked about here, or what you're considering, is just general access. And there are some challenges with that when you look at something like midweek, because our school facilities midweek are used for organized activities, but they're also open fairly late most nights for the students themselves through the CDC programs, REC programs, ASO functions, PTA functions, things like that. So I guess there's some logistical challenges there that I'd like to understand what you're proposing. Weekends, though, there is a lot more flexibility there. So there is, a lot of organized use for sports programs, but in terms of playground access and things like that, that's something we could definitely look into. I think the biggest concern is liability. Their liability insurance for this type of proposal maybe would be pretty interesting. So I'd like to see what Manhattan Beach has done there. But also something to keep in mind is our school sites are designed for supervised use, where parks are designed really for unsupervised use. So there might also be some site retrofitting and other things that need to go in there. But one thing also to keep in mind is I'm only speaking for myself. I do not speak for the Board of Education on this. I'll be really informing them and serving as liaison. So I would love to answer questions. I don't know if this, or have a discussion, but I don't know if this is necessarily the appropriate format for that, since this is just a public comment.
I don't think we're going to be responding to any questions though. So, or Leslie, you have something specific?
Yeah, I don't know if this is appropriate time or how we can engage, but I've always wondered, how do we engage on using the school sites for community use?
Point of order, please.
Yeah, it's
out of order.
Yeah, it's. So we're not having
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Dan. Lena, do we have anybody else?
We have one other person, Tom Bacali from BCHD. Tom, you can go ahead and unmute, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, everybody. Tom Backley. I'm the CEO of the Beach Cities Health District. We submitted an e-comment as well, so I'll make it brief. The health district, whether as the hospital or the health district, has partnered with the city of Redondo Beach for over 60 years. So obviously regarding something like open space, we'd be willing to discuss a mutually beneficial joint use agreement. We would see ourselves much more than a stakeholder. We would see ourselves as a partner. And we look forward to having that discussion with you in the future. And there's obviously no open space today on the campus to speak of. And we are proposing some open space in the master plan that our board has approved. And we'll be coming to the city with that shortly, but you have our official comments in the e-comment. I just wanted to emphasize that as a longstanding partner and public entity that has partnered great with Redondo, whether it be for domestic abuse issues or certainly related to COVID. We look forward to continuing our partnership on other extremely important issues like open space.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you, Tom. And then, Chair, we do have 3 e-comments. I can either read them now or on the second go around of public comment.
How much time have we used up?
Not even 6 minutes.
Let's go ahead and read those in, so in case we have to power through.
Okay, so then, so the first comment, actually, so it's from Mark Nelson. He actually submitted 2 e-comments. So I'll read them together. The prior meeting was chaired and called by Mr. Bureau. Mr. Bureau serves on the BCHD Properties Committee and received a roughly $300,000 no bid contract from BCHD to pursue permitting at the city of Redondo Beach. Mr. Bureau is now conflicted and must be removed from the GPAC as he is now in an advocacy role for the single largest $400 million development in Redondo Beach. I assert that any GPAC meetings involving Mr. Bureau on a forward basis are tainted and invalid, especially the January 2022 meeting that is considering open space because of his committee appointment by the BCHD board and his $300,000 no bid advocacy contract from BCHD. And then continued, Redondo Beach is at a crossroads in public space. In the 1950s, South Bay Hospital District was voter approved for the express purpose of building, owning, and operating a public emergency hospital for the exclusive benefit of the 3 beach cities of HB, RB, and MB. SBHD made a resolution of necessity finding and condemned the 10-acre parcel on Prospect for that use. In 1984, South Bay Hospital failed and the building was leased out to various operators. At the time of the failure, the resolution of necessity and the voter-approved purpose of SBHD ended. Subsequently, SBHD renamed itself BCHD in 1993, keeping the land, assets, cash, and property taxes with no further voter approval and no resolution of necessity. As a result, 10 acres of PCF public land that was condemned is being held by BCHD and is unavailable for public use. As a 3+ year volunteer at BCHD, I have repeatedly attempted to get BCHD to grant a deed restriction beyond the existing ones added by the court on the use of the parcel as a hospital. BCHD has refused. We cannot allow our public land to be held hostage. BCHD no longer fulfills its voter-approved mandate, nor its resolution of necessity used for foreclosure. The land should be returned to the public's use as open space, and BCHD should be disbanded, and the 3 beach cities should administer the property tax assessment that was exclusively approved for an emergency hospital. End of comment. And then last e-comment, Tom Bacali. BCHD supports the goals and policies that the GPAC is recommending for the open space element and the general plan update to increase the amount of usable open space for its residents. BCHD understands that a joint use agreement for public-private open space is a tool that can be used to achieve these goals. BCHD believes in the importance of usable open space for the residents of the district in Redondo Beach and would be open to discuss a mutually beneficial joint use agreement at the appropriate time when the campus project is formally submitted to the city for review. And end of comment. And that completes the e-comments for this time, Chair.
Thank you. All right. Next item.
All right. Okay, Chair. So just a comment on this. We do have implementation measures here, and they are to consider ways to mitigate risk to partner agencies. We've cited the Manhattan Beach example. We haven't gone in and we haven't completed our research on what exactly they have, but that's something we'll look at certainly, and then consider supervised programs. I don't know if the GPAC is satisfied with those implementation measures. We do plan, of course, to expand and complete all the implementation measures. We've gotten some input tonight on that, and we can certainly, bring back something that maybe speaks to the issue of, for example, that Dan Elder referenced for general use, not just supervised programs. So I don't know if that's something that GPAC would want to consider further or not on an implementation measure. But I wanted to just bring that up since we're on this topic. You have a couple raised hands, Chair.
Member Solomon.
Thank you, Chair Bureau. Question for, it may have been answered in the last meeting, but the joint use agreements and quote unquote prioritizing coordination with the school district and the Beach Cities Health District, is this something that was raised or brought up in the previous meeting and agreed to by the group? Or is this something just being introduced tonight for consideration?
No, this has been in all the drafts prior to this.
Okay. And then the second item I would suggest at this point, seeing as how it was brought up by a member of the public, at some point, I know our Director Forbes answered this question at City Council, which would be to highlight that Chair Bureau, you approached planning and discussed whether or not you should or should not be recused from discussions and votes with regard to the Beach City Health District.
Yeah, actually,
that would be a good idea.
Yeah. Actually, it was the city attorney's office that reviewed that and advised. So it would be on any item where it's making a recommendation or discussing the health district that Nick will recuse himself. And I think Nick acknowledged that at the last meeting.
Okay, thank you for that. Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Member Light.
Yeah, just a couple things. First, the BCHD property is zone P-CF, public community facility and parks, and open space and recreational facilities are a permitted use, not a conditional use under that zoning. So I think there's a little bit of misrepresentation there in the email that came. But secondly, I wanted to, I think we're getting too far in the weeds to discuss what kind of agreements with the school district, but certainly, I think the community would like to explore unsupervised use of the school facilities, similar to like we do the track at Aviation, the old Aviation High sports field. I know, place I came from and other communities I lived in the military, we use school facilities all the time for their track and things like that. They're just open fields for things like kickball and pick up softball games and stuff like that. Throughout from being a kid to being an Air Force officer, being shipped around the country. And, it just surprised me that this community is so restrictive on the use of their school facilities to only organize things like AYSO, which many of us are too old to participate in. So I think we're too far in the weeds to say what the implementation measure might be, but certainly my expectations were we would be looking at potentially some unsupervised activities. And that's it. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Jim. Member Lamb.
Yes. I would like to have the Parks and Recreation really weigh in on this in terms of implementation. I hadn't thought about the track, but I think that there's some opportunity here. And again, I'd like to see the Parks and Recreation Department really weigh in. That's the crux of the involvement is going to come from Parks and Recreation. Second, it is my understanding that in Manhattan Beach that it's almost exclusively organized sports that are shared. And we're already, it appears from what Dan said, is that we're already having those agreements with our formal sports organizations. So that's it for me for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sheila. Member Samers.
I wanted to thank Dan Elder for joining us and speaking for a few minutes. Appreciate that. And then also on the issue of the joint use agreements, I think that maybe we should just leave the option open, for the city in the future, consider whether supervised or general use sort of school or health district facilities. And then staff at the time or the city will, investigate and see what can be accomplished. It might not be feasible to do everything we want, and maybe we should just let them investigate and leave those options open. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Member Nafisi.
Candace. I too want to, one second, I'm echoing because I'm two Zooms here. I too want to explore the unsupervised school play. I think our schools are integrated pieces of our community, and they're also located at the hearts of our communities. I know several other schools and a handful of schools in Redondo kind of allow this like unsupervised play, and it's kind of like, I don't know, the school doesn't know about it, but the school is open. So it would be nice to kind of have some uniformity across the city that all the schools were open after hours, since there is such a lack of open space for our children. I also want to be known that I don't really support prioritizing working with BCHD. As we've seen with the exclusive agreement that they have with RBUSD, and the critical time of crisis in the last 2 weeks, they continue to let us down.
Member Nafisi, we can barely hear you.
In between Christmas break and New Year's, they decided to close. And
Member Nafisi, you're cutting out.
So I just wanted to be on the record that I don't support BCHD and prioritizing them in a joint use agreement. They don't have my faith in this community, and I don't think they do the best thing for the community. So I just wanted to be on the record. But, thank you.
Member Nafisi, you're going to have to repeat most of what you said at the end. You were cutting out. All right, Member Solomon.
I'll be quick or brief. I'm sorry about that. Member Suzanne, I think, was first, but I'm going to echo a little bit of what I heard of Candace's remarks in that I don't know if this is the right time for the Beach Cities Health District. If we're talking about the use of open space for a project that may happen or may not happen, and there's really not a great deal of open space available right now at the Beach CHD that's open to public uses. There's, as far as open space goes, there's certainly the gym and some of the other areas that are used by the public. As far as the school district goes, I would agree with what's been said with regard to the programming. I think the school district would make a good partner for coordination for their open space. Thank you.
Member Shorzan.
Thank you. Ms. Nafisi, we couldn't hear most of what you said, so I'm eager to hear what you did say. Yeah, I'm a bit confused about the dialogue tonight so far. The Beach Cities Health District, how I've seen it executed to date, is mostly private, even though it's public funded, which has been frustrating. I know personally, as a user of a gym, I wish it was had extended hours. I appreciate the school board participation tonight with Mr. Elder. This is the 5th district I've lived in as an adult, and the only one that hasn't had full public use of a school site for anyone from the public to use after hours. I understand the after school activities, etc. But it certainly has limiting use thus far for the public in general, school sports, after school basketball, for example, even for practicing. I'd like to see that expanded. Again, I'm not exactly sure how this is playing into tonight's agenda, but I would like to see a closer partnership and expansion of those public use of those facilities, of schools and partnerships there, and the Beach Cities Health District. Thanks.
Thank you. Member Funabashi.
Thank you, Chair Barrow. I wanted to say, first of all, while I appreciate each of the members here of the committee expressing their concerns and, dare I say, critiques of both the Beach Cities Health District, perhaps even some critiques of the school district, I think our role as a committee obviously is to develop a highline policy that encourages the development and maintenance of open space. And so I think the fact that the very concise policy paragraph as written that basically reads that we're going to prioritize coordination with the school district and Beach Cities Health District to develop joint use agreements to expand the parks and recreation facility offerings and to improve the geographic distribution of such offerings is really kind of the highline direction that we want in our policy. While I agree that we should probably open up, I'd love to see the school district open up the schoolyards and for different use. That's really more of the day-to-day integration that the city will work, with those two entities to bring that about. But I think for our purpose as a committee, that this is really what we need to do is just really look at that paragraph and see, do we want to add a little bit more to it? Improving geographic distribution of such offerings. I read that to mean to make it as fair and equitable from the top of the city down to the southern end geographically. But other than that, I think let's just stick to the main topic of this policy itself specifically. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Pinsler.
Nick, I was hoping that this meeting would not have to go until midnight again. And adding issues like this are completely out of order. There was no reason why the words "and Beach Cities Health District" has to be in this. If we've learned anything from the Galleria project, it is that plans don't necessarily end up being what ends up. And if in fact something happens with the Beach Cities Health District, and it may or may not, then that can certainly be incorporated into what happens to this. There's no reason for us to be going through this with this particular item. And it does indicate that you may have a blind spot about this. And I really believe that taking all the references to Beach Cities Health District out of this, we could have gotten through this in 5 minutes. So please, let's get rid of it. Let's get rid of it and just deal with what we know to exist. We want to prioritize with the school district to see what we can do. And we have some implementation measures that might help to implement that. Just take the health district out of this and we'll be fine. Thanks.
Chair, if I may,
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify, that was a recommendation to add that at the last meeting. And because we had the outreach from both the school board and Beach Cities Health District that they both wanted to speak tonight, we just have this up here. Agreed that we don't need to belabor this, but that was something that was added at the last meeting as a recommendation by the GPAC.
Thank you, Brandy. Member Light.
I was just going to say, we voted on this last time, and Brandy just cleared that up. I agree with Member Funabashi in his comments. I think we're getting too far in the weeds on this. But I would like to add, this is not a document for today. If you look at the last general plan update, it was 1992. Certainly something can happen with the Beach Cities Health District property in 30 years. That's the foreseeable future on this document we're putting forward. And I don't think it hurts anything to say, prioritize coordination for some joint use agreements on that in the future. So I think we're nitpicking over things that are going to happen in the future. In this document, I think the policy is good as stands that we voted on last time, and we should move on. Thank you.
I agree. Let's take the last two comments that we have. Member Nafisi.
Sorry, I think many people couldn't hear me. I won't take you guys through all my comments. I just wanted to say I wanted to be on the record that I didn't support prioritizing Beach Cities Health District for a joint use agreement. I feel that they have continued to fail this community over and over, and I wanted to put it on the record that I don't support that. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Samuels.
Oh, I just wanted to address a point that Bob made earlier about the utility of including the beach cities in here. Actually, it makes good sense to include something in this document because it gives the city, let's call it sort of the legal backing to enter into those types of negotiations or discussions with the health district in the future. I'm not saying it's a requirement, but it just adds to the, authority or legal ability to, make that kind of a request. Yeah, that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Member Samuels. I think with that, what do we need on this item?
I think we just move on to the next discussion. I think we just want to make sure that that both of those organizations that had been discussed at the last meeting had been heard. So I think we're ready to move on for the next slide.
Thank you. Let's move on.
Thank you. All right, next slide. Okay, so now these are the next two slides or the next few slides. These are comments we received that have been provided as blue folder items from GPAC members. This one is this comment summarizes what we received from Jim Hannon. It's a little bit of a backtrack again to the open space section, but generally it's a request from this committee member for some additional goals and policies. If you look at GPAC, please consider the following active transportation goals. And I don't necessarily want to speak for Jim completely, but we reviewed what he had to, what we've circulated to you all, and we have a recommendation. And we have an existing policy, OS 1.8, that what Jim is asking for could be added to that. That's just staff's opinion, as well as the other item. We would consider that to be more of an implementation measure, and we could certainly add that as well to what you'll see in the future. But again, it's certainly up to the GPAC on this matter. So
if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
So what we have here is the recommendation of adding bike parking near all city parks and open space. and adding that under policy OS 1.8, and then a bike walk trail network that is appropriate for families/children and connected to all city parks and open space. And this could be included as an implementation measure. So it may be worthwhile if the GPAC wants to move on this particular, these two recommendations.
So can we do these one at a time? We'll do Member Hannon's comment first, and then we'll move on to Member Light's comments. Because we're getting some questions now on.
Sean, did you have it? Is this making it clearer, adding the bike parking?
It's just added, it's just a component to add, a little bit of detail to the policy.
Okay.
So because it talks about what it seems to infer, the policy is all about access, providing parking for vehicles. And this just wants to stipulate, because usually when we say provide parking, we're thinking cars. This just adds the detail that's very clear that we'd be looking to add bicycle parking.
So Sean, the action here is to incorporate this comment into this policy and do an action on that as a group.
Correct.
Okay, so before we do that, we have 3 questions and then we'll go on that. So 4 questions. Member Solomon.
Thank you, Chair Bureau. I'd support Member Hannon's remarks and ask staff if adding the bike parking infrastructure creates a problem where there's additional setbacks or other types of limitations or challenges by implementing or adding something like that to it.
I wouldn't consider it to be an issue in any way. Most of the development on parks, when they do, are somewhat substantial, require planning commission design review. We set setbacks and other standards in a discretionary way for that land use. So, as long as it's safe and appropriately located, we don't see any problem with that at staff's level.
Okay, that's the case, and I think it's a good idea, and thank Member Hannon for it.
Thank you. Member Samaras.
I think it's a great idea, and I'm really glad Member Hannon recommended this. If this ends up needing a motion to approve, I'll be happy to make that motion after discussion.
Okay, we have a motion. Let me take the last couple of questions, Paul. Member Light.
Yeah, just a couple of things like everybody else. I think these are good ads, and I agree with the staff recommendations. My question to Jim, since he's the author, is does he agree with the recommendations? Do the recommendations meet, what he was asking in his comment?
Member Hannon?
Yeah, I think they do. The intent was just to be able to balance the parking out with, we're going to have some automobile parking as well as bicycle parking. I would like to see that. I'm sure that, the concern about where it's located too, typically you want bicycle parking at the entrance. That's the first thing you do is drop your bike there and you go into the park. So I don't think that would be in conflict, but I do think there's an opportunity here, and a great metric would be to, how many people, looking back at one point, how many people can we get to ride their bikes or walk to these parks and leave their car at home, and maybe take parking spots and maybe additional room for parks. So it would certainly make more sense to me, but I think it's fine.
Yep. Okay. Well, thanks for bringing them up. I really appreciate it. I'm supportive, and I'll second the motion that was put forward.
Thank you, Jim. We have one more question. Member Sharzan.
I appreciate these comments being brought up. I know there's some parks where there is not current bicycle parking. Moonstone Park is an example where I'm looking for public parking, and car parking is a challenge there, especially more recently. So having bicycle parking I've been looking for that. And there's other parks that I've noticed there is bicycle parking, but it's not very well advertised. So improved signage as to where that is located is very appreciated. So I am very much for the comments made here. Thanks.
Thank you. So we have a motion by member Samaras and seconded by member Light. Can we do a quick vote for this? So just raise your hand, please. Oops. Lena, you can take over from here.
So we're up to 18, 19. Anyone else? 20. Okay. All right. And so, okay, 20, okay, 20, let's see, okay, so go ahead and lower your hands. And then is there anyone opposed? Okay. Member Samaras, you still have your hand raised? Okay. All right. So it looks like none opposed.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great.
Let's go to member Lamb's comment.
Yes. Next slide, Hallie. Can you switch that up? I'm certain she's feverishly trying to do so.
In the meanwhile, thank you, Jim Hannon, for those comments.
Wasn't there a second comment about connecting parks with routes?
It was an implementation measure. Make a motion to approve that as an implementation measure.
I thought we were approving both at the same time.
That was my motion.
Okay.
I wonder if Kylie lost connection. And we need
Yeah, maybe she did.
because it went blank for a moment.
Did
Yeah.
Lena, are you able to?
Yeah, let me stop sharing her screen. I should be able to stop sharing her screen. Or at least share mine. Let me just pull it up. Give me one moment.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so I have it up. Let me see if I can share screen over Hallie's screen. Let's see. Okay.
Okay.
Everyone sees that? I'm
Yeah.
assuming? Okay.
Yes.
And we were on page 18, I believe?
Not quite, I think 12.
Okay. Or 12, okay.
Sheila's comment.
This one, right? I think I read 1.8. That's what it was.
Yeah.
All right. So this would be the next page.
Okay. All right. So let's see. So these were. So we, Chair. We can take these
presentation mode.
What?
Can Lena go to presentation mode?
Oh,
there you
okay.
go.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Lena. So, Chair, these are proposed. These came from committee member Lamb prior to our last meeting, but they were for the conservation goals and policies. So we have those here. We can actually go. We can take these on after we go through the draft policies and goals for conservation. But I have a slide for them. We've reviewed all of her input, and it might be better now to actually move to the policies, and then we can come back to Sheila's additional goals and policies that she's putting forward, kind of like we did last time, and then we rolled them in, into what we'd already gone through. I might suggest that.
Let's do that. That makes sense.
Okay, great. So we'll come back to these when we go through the actual goals and policies that are in the draft element.
Hold on, Sean. Member Lamb.
Yes, once I reviewed the updated draft, I realized that these, what I had offered was already included in the new draft documents. So these comments that I've made, these past comments are no longer relevant.
Okay.
I firmly believe that they are already now included in various forms in the document for conservation. So subsequently, I've added an additional. I just did some updated comments. One was for open space, and then I think there's just a couple for the water resources that we have talked about only. So especially to save time, we don't have to come back to those comments. But I would like to have the GPAC members consider the open space the updated comments for the open space, which is really about signage, and if that's appropriate at this point in time.
So, Sean,
we've got, so those are the recent blue folder items that committee member Sheila's referring to. And she has, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sheila, but you have a couple of open space
it was one, Sean, one.
Okay.
I've got it pulled up if you would want me to share those.
If we do that open space before we go into
then because the other ones we can pull up when we get to those particular conservation elements. Okay.
That sounds great. One open space item on the blue folder items.
Okay. So Lena, if you want to stop sharing, and then I'll just, tag team share here. Let's see. Okay. Can you see that all right here? So it's this first one here is the open space. It's under that future open space and recreation needs, providing high quality open spaces and recreational facilities under goal OS2, adding a new policy, harbor access and wayfinding. The harbor and beaches with their recreational facilities are easily accessible from many locations, enhance visibility of existing access points, improve wayfinding infrastructure, require new development to minimize impacts to existing public access to the harbor and shoreline.
I would just like to clarify on that is one of the challenges that I've seen in visiting King Harbor is that there's very little there's not a sufficient amount of wayfinding or signage that shows points of interest, viewpoints. So this would sort of codify or highlight the importance of that. And if it's better as an implementation measure, I'm really fine with that. It's really the spirit of it that I think is important.
Thank you. Can I suggest adding one of the things about the harbor is that it was broken up into 3 distinct leaseholds, and that's why it's sort of broken up, and it doesn't have the actual connectivity that it should have. Where you have enhanced visibility of existing access, can I suggest improving access instead of maintaining the existing access? Because one of the problems that the harbor has is that it's so disjointed, and the connectivity within the harbor is bad. Why not take a chance here and try to improve on the connectivity as opposed to improve the existing accesses?
That would be fine with me.
Okay, thank you. So I would suggest that where after it says enhance visibility and enhance access and connectivity, within the harbor, or yeah.
Am I missing it? It's so the
visibility and
Enhanced.
connectivity.
So here at
Yeah.
okay. I'm gonna have to type it separately because I'm in a
It's a PDF. I understand. So I mean,
enhanced visibility. Let me see if I can add a comment here. Comment. Enhanced visibility and
connectivity throughout the harbor enterprise zone, I guess. Because I do agree, you go out there and not only is it hard to get your way or find your way around, but it's just purposely designed that way. Just not designed that way, just turned out that way after 50 years of 3 separate leaseholds. So, right. Member Light.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I support both of these. I was here almost nearly a decade before I found out there was a hand-launched boat ramp, and it was probably after that I found out that there was a park on Mulby, although when I went there I was pretty disappointed in it. But yeah, it just happened to be that, I was launching my kayaks from the beach, which with big waves is problematic. And somebody said, why don't you just use the harbor hand launch? And I didn't even know one was there because there's nothing that really flagged it to the public. So I fully support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Any other comments? I'll make a motion that we approve Member Lamb's comments with the edit.
Second.
Got it.
I'm gonna stop sharing so you guys can.
Thank you. Lena, you take over from here. You do such a great job with that.
So if everyone can use their raise hand function to vote yes, all those voting yes. Okay. We're at 19, 20. Okay. I think that's unanimous then, but go ahead and lower your hands and then let me just call for anyone that votes no, any no's. Okay, one last call for no's. Okay, no, otherwise seeing none.
We're none, so ordered. Perfect. Thank you very much. We can move on to the next slide. And I guess, Lena, you're taking back over control of the slideshow. Have we heard back from Haley?
Oh, there she is.
Oh,
Back.
It should work this time.
Oh, wonderful.
You're back.
Just in time. Fantastic. So now, actually, Hallie, I believe we're not going to cover these. These are been incorporated already. So, okay, just real quick before we get into the goals and policies, and we all know this, so I won't say much more than just, we know we have our goals, which are desired future conditions, very high level, and our policies more specific for the guide decision making. We use them a lot as when we're reviewing projects and we have to make findings consistent with the policy. So, it has more detail, obviously, than the goals, and then implementation actions are, a whole nother level. They kind of set the stage for our strategic plan, the city's strategic planning going forward, and priorities and scheduling. So just a quick little, overview of the goals, policies, and implementation actions, which we are now going to get into for conservation. Next slide. And so this is where we're going to jump over to our working document. We have a Word document that committee member Light had provided a number of comments, and we're working off of that document to help expedite the discussion. So if you could go ahead, Hallie, and cue that up. We can jump into the first batch of goals. Great. Yeah, we might need to enlarge the screen if possible, zoom in. Thank you. So these are our first batch, goal OS-5, coastal resources. The goal itself is beaches, bluffs, harbors, and waters that serve the recreational needs of the community, enhance the city's economic vitality, preserve the unique natural environments, and sustain sensitive habitat areas within the city's coastal zone and jurisdictional waters. So that's our envisioned goal for coastal resources. And then we have these 4 originally drafted policies that deal with regional cooperation with other agencies, policy OS 5.1, the OS 5.2 harbor water quality. It has to do with, of course, the quality of the harbor and maintaining and preserving and improving that quality. And then limiting discharge, from our storm drains and stormwater into the Santa Monica Bay and our coastal waters. And then policy OS 5.4, erosion, trying to, establish a policy for preventing erosion of beaches and coastal bluffs. It has to, again, a lot to do with stormwater management. And then we have an additional policy that was drafted by Committee Member Light regarding sea level rise. And that's a new policy OS 5.5. There's nothing on the next page, correct, Hallie?
No, that's it.
Okay. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to the chair for the GPAC to consider and discuss and make a recommendation. And any questions as well.
I'll start off with a question, and probably the question would be to Jim. What does a sea level master plan look into, or what is? How do we do that, or how is that being incorporated, and what would be the baseline for somebody once a sea level master plan is in place that would set the future finished floor for development in the harbor be? So is it,
Sorry, Nick, I didn't mean to walk on you there. I'll let you finish.
No. I'm just curious on who does this. I mean, I know there's some waterfront consulting firms that would do this, but I wonder what would be the baseline and how is this executed in order to have in place? How do we achieve this policy of having a sea level rise master plan, and how is it accomplished? And do we do it, or do you wait until there's an applicant that comes in for them to do it in order to establish that? And how do we check it?
So this has been a big topic at the Harbor Commission for multiple meetings. There's a basic, the Coastal Commission is defining, what cities have to build to as far as planned sea level rise. And that's being updated because it's actually faster than what they anticipated. I think it's important to put in here now because there is a resilience plan, I think is the term, Sean, that they're using for it. But the thing we're going to have to wrestle with pretty quickly is, do we go after public funding to do a lot of this sea level rise mitigation, or do we put it all on new leaseholders, which will obviously either make the marketing of the property untenable, or we'll have to accommodate a whole bunch of density to offset the cost of putting in the infrastructure and mitigations. So I think it's important to have this plan in place and start looking at defining strongly what we do publicly, and then what do we levy on new developers. So it's getting to the issues you were talking about there, Nick.
Yeah.
And I agree with the comment here that it's going to be in the in the safety plan, but I still think, and I thought we discussed this last time, was we should at least note it here and that.
Yes, and Hallie has that in the notes there from our our recommendation here would be to reference it under, are you talking about it like a sidebar, Hallie? Is that what we'd had these discussions. We had analyzed all of Jim's proposed edits, and these are our notes from that as well. So
yeah, we talked about adding it similar to what we did with the utilities policies.
Okay.
To look at those additional policies to see that they are also relevant to the school.
And Jim, I just got a glimpse, I think today, of the draft safety element policies with respect to sea level rise. And there's a number of policies that do reference it. And we, again, we would reference it here in the safety element, and then an implementation measure could be, drafted that would, detail out the development and execution of.
Yeah, I'm fine with the reference, just so we have something here that points to it and where to find it.
All right.
And sea level rise would also impact water quality. All drainage right now that's going out to the ocean that would sort of get backwatered from any sea level rise that would essentially bubble out into the streets, and then you would have, any BMPs that are being installed now that could be rendered useless. So maybe this is more than just the harbor itself, but it has, we need to establish to what, how many feet above sea level are we checking around the city itself. So I don't know if that's something to include here as well. Member Pinsler.
Just to reiterate about this, this is going to have to be approved by the Coastal Commission, and the Coastal Commission wants this. So we might as well put it in anyway. But my guess is that it's going to have to be a little more fulsome than just a single line. But that is something for the Harbor Commission to be working on. And but I doubt very much if the Coastal Commission would approve something if it didn't have this in it. So we might as well get ahead of the game.
I think that's an excellent point, Bob. That's they actually have they had grant funding out there, and I know our waterfront and economic development department was looking into that for doing exactly this kind of planning. So we'll keep pursuing that and working with the Coastal Commission on that.
Member Funabashi.
Thank you, Chair. I only wanted to add that perhaps we should correspondingly put a comment into the funding source aspect of our policy, maybe even going as far as referencing the need as part of that policy of obtaining funding from outside sources to include improvements to the harbor to respond to sea rise. Just so maybe that would be a separate element noted in the other aspect of our policy related to funding and from outside sources.
Okay. Before I go to Member Lamb, I just want to bring, as all this stuff is being typed, because if we don't have the sea level rise plan, or we'll have impacts to discharge as well as water quality in regards to what that level is and the impact to BMPs that are put in place that are at lower levels. So, Member Lamb. You're muted, Sheila.
My apologies. So I would like to reference the section policy OS-5.3 limit discharge. The last sentence states continue to require low impact development stormwater management measures within the coastal zone, but consider expansion to the city's non-coastal zones. I would like to include require for both, for the coastal zone and for the city's non-coastal zones, for citywide. I think that's best practice. Also, Chair Barrow, you've talked about BMTs. I'm not that familiar, but I would like to add require new public and private developments to use BMPs on residential and commercial projects, if they aren't already.
I think they are. Sean, do you know what? I think LIDs are mandatory, and Paul's shaking his head. So yeah, I think those that BMPs and LIDs are required throughout the city. So, but
That's correct. Yes, there's a different threshold in the coastal zone for smaller projects and it's not applicable in the non-coastal zone, but larger projects, yes. All around the city.
Okay.
Are those adequate for across the city? Should they be equal to the coastal zone? I have read the standard stormwater runoff plan, and it does indicate that it leaves the door open for the city council to add new regulations. So, is this the time to do that with this document?
Yeah, absolutely. This document, that particular sentence that's highlighted by Hallie that you're referencing, Sheila, this would be the place to, let's say, strengthen the requirement and have it citywide for all development projects.
So shall I leave it up to you to create that language?
I think yes. I think we can, maybe recraft that sentence, to make sure if what I'm hearing is, not only require it low-end impact development, stormwater management measures in the coastal zone, but also throughout the city, so citywide.
Yes.
And we can certainly, come up with the language to accomplish that, if that's the will of the GPAC.
Isn't part of the, maybe Paul can help me, MS4 permit that the city has with the Regional Water Quality Control Board, doesn't it require to have this already in place? I mean, if it's there, that's fine if we put it, but I think we're already there.
It does it's got various thresholds. And what we're talking about here is basically raising the bar for requirements. Or I don't know, raising the bar, lowering the bar, applying it, not having exclusions for development. And again, we would have to measure it for consistency purposes against the ordinance that governs that. If we have the authorities, if we're granted the authorities, and they wouldn't put us afoul of that permit, then in fact, we could make that change. So there could be, a general plan policy to direct us to do so, and maybe a law that it would be in conflict with, and we would only be able to go so far with that policy. But
let me call on Member Samaras, because I know he knows this stuff, at least from Paul. Can you help us out here?
I wouldn't claim to know more than the planning manager, but I would simply say that there are minimum thresholds, when those BMPs are required. So I'm just throwing out just a general example. If you're building a new commercial building, if it's over on a property larger than a certain size, then it triggers these improvements, So there's different thresholds for requiring these measures for different types of development. So what the planning manager was saying was, perhaps we can look into lowering the thresholds. That way more projects are subject to these LID measures. And that's fine. Perhaps including some general language that allows staff in the future to kind of investigate kind of expanding, LID measures in other areas, would make sense. And that way you give people flexibility to investigate if it's feasible, if it imposes an undue burden on certain developments. That way we've given them some general direction without saying, no, you have to expand everything throughout the city or lower all the thresholds.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to see this for a building permit for one home that they have to prepare an LID.
Even for single family homes, there are some requirements from what I understand, but you don't want to go into requiring it whenever somebody wants to do a small remodel in their house, So what I'm trying to say is, we can give staff in the future to look into where can we improve on what we're already doing, and then go from there.
Thank you, Member Singers. Member Lamb.
I'm sorry.
Oh.
I need
to lower your hand.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Member Light.
Yeah, two things. First, I support what Sheila said, although I don't mind putting in a little bit of wishy-washiness to soften it up because of the concerns brought up by yourself and members Maras. But I did want to also comment that we already modified the funding profile policy to add a 4.6 that specifically discusses going after federal and state funding for mitigating sea level rise. So I think we already accommodated that last time. And those are my two comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Member Solomon.
Thank you, Chair Bureau. A couple of a question and a comment to follow along with what something that Member Samaras was saying. Being careful not to create some sort of de facto prohibition for certain types of projects that might otherwise have other aspects of this direction tossed or disregarded. When you talk about exceptions for certain things in development, so want to make sure we don't have a de facto prohibition against certain types of development, or if we are, to make sure we're careful about that. The other being, if you could please, for me, Jim, when you included it as a new private development, differentiate or make a distinction for me where new private development would be different from some other type of development. Is private development a term of art?
I'm not sure what you're talking about. You're talking about the sea level rise plan?
Where in OS 5.3, where you said you have encouraged the use of BMPs on new private development and retrofit projects. Is private development a term of art or something? If you could describe what private development would be for me versus something that's not private development.
I don't believe that's something I changed.
Just to clarify, Eugene, that was the areas that Jim had recommended changes are the ones that have that are the light blue and underlined.
Okay, thank you.
And then we have clarified different items in the comments so that, and just, I know that you weren't able to be at the last meeting. So what we would do is go through all, note here all the proposed changes and then vote on the goal and policies.
Okay.
So can we remove the word private? I mean, because it then applies to all developments. Is that a nod from Jim? Yeah, that's the word private is not really doing much for us. So just any developments that.
Okay, and that's the essence of what I was trying to get to, Chair Bureau, is what if there's some sort of specificity with regard to private versus non-private. I didn't know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Member Pinsler.
Just a question, because it's been a while since I've dealt with this, but under the NPDES, the city has liability if it doesn't meet those goals. Are we going to state in this that we are going to meet those requirements, or is that assumed in the in this, particularly the limit discharge section?
Well, the city is a co-applicant with any development. Should the developer fail, the city takes over. So the city the city's on board with all this. At least they have to be.
So what I'm saying is that should we make sure that, because let's just say that many cities have not kept up with the requirements of the NPDES. So this is something that we need to make sure that we are writing so that it states that we are specifically dealing with NPDES.
Okay. Good comment.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. No further comments. We have so what's our action here, Sean?
So yeah, this is where now if the discussion concluded that,
I'll go through the items that are proposed recommended changes. So under goal OS 5, under policy OS 5.3, adding commitment to meet the requirements of NPDES, removing private when talking about BMPs in new development, and revising the last sentence to require the LIDs citywide for all development projects having the same requirements in citywide as that are in the coastal. And we would need to measure against the existing ordinances and investigate expansion of stricter requirements. And then under policy OS 5.4, it's adding the continuing the beach bluff restoration language, and then adding the new policy OS 5.5, sea level rise, prioritize the development and execution of a harbor sea level rise master plan. And we will also have that in the safety element, adding reference here. And then as an implementation item, developing a harbor resiliency master plan to strengthen the resiliency of the harbor to coastal flooding hazards such as sea level rise and coastal flooding. And then ensuring that we still have that under that funding goal, improvements to the harbor to respond to sea level rise. And we may have already added that. So those would be the recommended changes.
Brandy, point of clarification. On policy OS 5.5, what we discussed was just putting in a reference to the sea level rise policies and the safety instead of adding.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I have a question on that though. The way you've written it here, it looks like it's just going to be in some reference list at the end. I thought what we discussed was putting a sidebar and referencing the other document in the sidebar.
Yes. So we can add a reference in sidebar.
And I'm okay with that.
Do we know what that reference is, Jim? Okay. Or is it referenced how?
So it will look like the reference up here in the way that we've referenced the utilities element.
Got it.
Only it will reference the safety element and the specific policies that address sea level rise.
Okay. Got it.
And then on for the direction on policy OS 5.3, there was some discussion about requiring stricter requirements, and then also about instead of requiring, essentially investigating stricter requirements. And I'm not sure that we landed on a final recommendation to vote on there.
Was that Eugene's point of we don't want to end up prohibiting projects?
Yes.
Okay, then yeah.
Then what else do we need in there?
So
we don't forget what that is.
So instead of requiring citywide, it would be investigating expansion of stricter requirements citywide for all development projects.
Okay. Member Lamb, you have a question?
I do. I'm concerned that if on the beach side, there's already a requirement. we're just expanding, as it says here, consider expanding those requirements. I'm concerned that if you just investigate, it really loses its potency. Right?
I get what you're saying. So it's requiring it and then investigating, expanding stricter requirements.
There you go.
Okay.
Right.
So we'll leave that. I'm sorry about that. So I just wanted to get that clear because it was in two different conversations. So I wanted to make sure I'm on myself. So it's adding the requirement citywide, whereas previously we were just considering expanding it citywide, requiring it citywide, but then investigating, expanding to stricter requirements, is a separate implementation item.
Right. And you also indicated that, or Sean, you indicated that if it bumps up against some other laws and regulations, that then it would have to be modified. Is that correct?
Or the ordinance itself would have to be modified.
Right.
So,
but this wouldn't have to, the policy, the way it's written, wouldn't have to be modified. We would just have to modify the ordinance to comply with anything stricter. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. Thank you.
So I think we've got that cleaned up. So just to clarify in that last sentence under 5.3, requires citywide for all development projects. The same requirements as coastal zone would be citywide. Implementation item to ensure consistency with the city ordinance. Implementation item, investigate expansion of stricter requirements, lower thresholds. And then everything else that was mentioned previously.
Okay. So I'll make a motion. We approve as we discussed and we have edited this evening. Goals for open space 5 or open space policies 5.1 through 5.45.
Second the motion.
Second.
We have a second by member Light. Lena?
And so everyone raise your hands for voting yes. All those voting yes. 15, 20. Okay. I think that's unanimous, but let me go ahead and have everyone lower your hands. And is there anyone voting no? Okay. All hands lower. Looks like no one voting no.
Perfect. Next item.
okay, go on ahead, Hallie. Into water resources. And this is goal OS6, water resources, efficient use of the city's water resources to protect both the short and long-term water supply. So very, very general, broad goal. We have a number of policies that really talk about water conservation, water-wise planning, public education, really educating the public, homeowners and business owners about water conservation, stormwater management strategies, policy OS63, groundwater infiltration. And a lot of these measures are really kind of playing out the MPPES, which is just really taking, as required by that law, that first flush of rain and keeping it on site and percolating it or treating it before it goes off site. So that's what a lot of these policies are really driving towards, just generally as well. So they're kind of a dual purpose. Then we have and then regional cooperation policy OS 6.4. And then, working with our other agencies that are the water purveyors and so forth. And then we have a new policy, OS 6.5, that Jim Light has proposed. Is there another one, Hallie, or is that?
Yeah, that was the end of it.
Okay.
Hold on. Under Sheila Lamb had the recommendation to add a new policy, recycled water, implement a recycled water plan to include citywide landscaping for parks, medians, and schools, encourage the use of laundry to landscaping systems in existing and new residential developments.
What was that last line? What was it? Laundry?
Encourage the use of laundry to landscaping systems in existing and new residential developments. And I don't know if that's a term of, art, or if there's something, Sheila, that's more specific on that, or where you may have, found that. I have not heard the laundry to landscape.
I've never heard that either. So Sheila, what's laundry to landscape?
So Pasadena has, and some other of our eastern neighbors have laundry to landscaping ordinances or encouragements. Actually, Pasadena gives a rebate, a $500 rebate. So it's a way to hook up your laundry to your landscaping. It's not expensive. Probably you can do a retrofit if you're a homeowner, but it would be much easier for new developments. And this is conserving water. Of course, we've had a lot of rain, so we're not so concerned about conserving water at this moment in time. But we all know, right, that drought will be with us into the future. So just another mechanism. And I added encourage, not require, but a way to highlight these different opportunities to conserve water. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that's a new one. I haven't seen that or heard about it, but it makes sense. It just, I guess from a plumbing standpoint, yeah, absolutely. It's easier for a new development to discharge that. I just don't know from a discharge standpoint how that ties up with water quality. So it makes sense to save water, but you're discharging now sewer equivalent water onto an open area. So I don't want you.
No, you're not.
You're not.
No, it's gray water.
It's gray water. Yeah, I can clarify for the gang if you like.
Please.
Sewer water, like for the toilet, is black water. Typically known as black water. Water from the laundry is known as gray water. In cities like Los Angeles, even, although I don't know that they strongly encourage it, they allow it. That's the kicker, where literally the water from the washing machine can go out to the backyard. So it doesn't save potable or supply side water, but it relieves the burden on sanitation and treatments at plants like Hyperion, and other waste treatment facilities. So that's where the benefits come from, not so much, although it does put water back in the water table in your backyard and can be used, for other uses. It doesn't become potable once again, though. So anyway.
Well, I mean, I can, for one who has taken a tour of a sewer treatment plant, that I will tell you that low flow toilets have created a mess out of our sewer system because there's not enough head pressure to get the waste to the sewer treatment plants. So I know it makes sense to conserve water, but at the same time, anybody that takes a tour of a sewer treatment plant, the last thing they tell you on the way out is flush twice, please. So just food for thought.
Maybe it's just that first portion of what Sheila had noted, which is recycle water, implement a recycle water plan to include citywide landscaping for parks, medians, and schools. And maybe it's in existing and new residential developments. So maybe it's just taking out a particular named type of program, but just acknowledging that there'd be, recycled water plan for how that could happen.
Yeah, that's fine. Let's go through some questions. Member Pinsler.
Yeah, well, this may seem like a nit, but the use of the term water resources and the efficient use of the water resources sounds like we pump water. My sense is that this is water management rather than resources. And I do have a problem with, because it sounds like when you say efficient use of cities' water resources, we don't have any water resources. We have water that we get from other agencies. So I just think that efficiently manage the city's water to protect both and to title it as water management. And that also helps to explain some of the other things that are in the bottom, is that they are management issues as opposed to developing new sources of water, which we don't do.
Great point. Thank you, Member Pinsler. Member Light.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I don't include, I think of the gray water issue as separate from the, what do we call it, recycling. Even though it is a form of recycling, I think most people think of recycling as, processing sewage water and bringing it back in for other uses. Even some communities even use it for drinking water. This gray water is a different thing, and it's something. It's like distributed power generation. Putting solar cells on your roof versus having a city solar yard. And I think we should encourage it. In fact, I think I talked to a plumber recently who said it's actually illegal in Redondo to hook up gray water to a landscape irrigation system or any system other than the sewer. In fact, they told me like outdoor showers have to go to the sewer, which doesn't make total sense. You want to regulate it, but you want to make it legal. And I would say California seems to be stuck on just laundry water, but other states allow you to do any gray water, which is water from your sinks and water from your showers and similar type of things that aren't black water. So any source of gray water. And so I do think we need to highlight that separately. As to the comment that it seems like the city staff is recommending not putting in my 6.5 because it's covered under 6.3. And I don't agree that the level of impact on private development is there in 6.3. So I'm okay with incorporating into 6.3 so long as it's more strongly stated in 6.3 for private development. I mean, it's almost an afterthought, and it just says, where is it there?
It's a little hard to read because I think you've got two screens going there. Or, is there a way you can? Yeah. Thank you. Because I can't even read it. My experience dies. I think it was last time. Is that better? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Hallie.
Yeah, so I guess the numbers have changed, but I think that the city's comment here was that accommodated under the groundwater infiltration. And I think that statement is pretty weak in what was originally OS 6.3. As far as requiring it on private development. Encouraging when not required. I think we should be requiring more.
So maybe it's the just requiring.
Yeah, change to requiring.
And then you could have the other components as the implementation items.
Yep, that's fine. That's fine with me.
Okay.
Member Eller.
I just wanted to note that I tried every type of soap and every type of secondary processing I could find, and using your laundry water for landscaping was poisonous to all of my plants. So I'd be very cautious about it from personal experience.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. No, I don't see how normal suds would be good for your plants anyway. Member Moses.
Yeah, this idea of laundry to landscaping water, it was popular. I remember people doing this, kind of just unplugging or disconnecting their washing machines and pumping it right into the gardens. But the detergents started building up, and that introduces a whole other big problem. And also the idea of that, the difference between that is, gray water is captured and it gets processed and pumped back into a system to be used again. If we promote people trying to just dump it into their yards, that water is technically just lost, and it's not very useful to the water. It's not going to recharge the aquifers in that sense. It's just lost, just like washing your car. So I don't know if that should be a good policy for the city to pursue, or maybe just clarify that, there's maybe an exception for this, but I think we ought to just promote gray water usage much more. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Member Moses. Good clarification. Member Lamb.
There we go. Okay. So I'm okay with striking out the laundry to landscaping. That's just fine with me. The gray water system. Now, my understanding is Redondo Beach pumps and does have wells. So we do have a certain proportion of our water comes from Redondo. I think it's somewhere between 20 and 40%. Also, our metropolitan water, I believe we have 2 vendors who we purchase water from, and one of them already provides, and planning manager Scully, I think we talked about this. I think you have some knowledge here, that they already provide some gray water for us, and this would, my proposal would just expand that. So, am I correct about that?
Yeah, that's correct. We do have some gray water in what is called purple pipe, running in certain areas of the city. The goal is to expand that, run that water all the way through the system, through the city ultimately. As developments come on board, for example, the Galleria project is being required to advance the pipe for the purple pipe, gray recycled water or into the city to the Galleria. So, that projects as they come online and in proximity, that's a negotiation that we enter into with the development community. And when the city has funds available to advance the line, they'll do so as well. So this is the place where we get this language to further drive and support the expansion of that water. I'm going to say this, sorry, committee member Pinsler, resource into the city. So if, and I don't have the PDF from Sheila, but are we seeing it in the language here for?
So I think I would add policy OS 6.6, recycled water, implement a recycled water, maybe change recycled water to gray water plan to include citywide landscaping for parks, medians, and schools.
Okay.
Also, the utilities element really has some interesting policies that relate to this. Infiltration, groundwater infiltration, and gray water management, I believe.
Correct. And we reference those.
Okay, that's great.
The formatting got a little funky, but they're here. So when we revise the formatting, they'll be next to the goals and policies.
Right. You know, I don't know if you can do this, but if you can, instead of just the policy themselves, there's about 4 or 5 policies that are really valuable for the to be seen. So if you can, I don't know if you can, I don't know if you have room, really just referencing it is not as powerful as writing out some of those policies, even if it's just 1 or 2. Just my thoughts on that. Thank you so much.
And maybe that's something we can do as a nice little sidebar just to, because this one does have a lot of interrelatedness with utilities.
It really does. Yeah.
Yes.
And that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Could you make a note of that, Hallie, to expand that sidebar reference to the utilities element, just so we make sure we capture that? Maybe a little narrative.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Member Solomon.
Thank you, Chair Bureau. I have a point and a question. On policy 6.3, for consistency's sake, the previous discussion we took and struck through the word private. There it just had development or developer. So would we then strike through private here and just have development rather than differentiating between public and private here for consistency's sake in the document? And then the next question I would have would be for Mr. Scully or Ms. Forbes. Does the city's strategic plan or current ideas for strategic planning, including re-engineering the sumps that we have around the city? So like the Wiley sump or some of the other collection receptacles that we have, are those currently being used to repurpose water? And if they're not, or do we have in our strategic plan the idea so that there'll be a consistency between this document and what the strategic planning or what's going on that way? So
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, the strategic planning's, usually I think that would be more in like the capital improvements program if there's going to be something happening at a sump. But I think it would be good. I mean, if you want to add that, like, the consideration of, those facilities for that repurposing.
I think if we're going to ask it of development, then we want to ask it of ourselves, and it would maybe encourage us to move forward or get the city on board with reformatting that. I think it'd be worthwhile including.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Member Pinzo.
Yeah, it's West Basin that does the purple pipe, correct, for us? And we already do use it in some landscaping and some medians, correct?
Correct.
So to say implement I would say it would be to expand a recycled water plan rather than implement, because we're already implementing in a number of places.
That's a good point.
And the answer on the Wiley sump is that sump is sanitation district, but it's part of the process by which it adds to the barrier that is the insertion wells that they have along the barrier to keep the seawater out. I think Wiley sump is an integrated part to that.
So West Basin manages the Wiley these sump up?
No, the LA Sanitation District does. It's not city land.
It's part of stormwater.
Yeah, it's a stormwater basin. And it's a part of the, because what they do is they inject water to keep the salt water from incursions into the drinking water. And that whole area is part of that process, if I'm not mistaken.
Maybe the note then is to work with other agencies to integrate this policy with other agencies for collection practices within the city.
Yeah, because up in the top in the introduction, you don't even mention West Basin, and they're a strategic element particularly in the tertiary water, the purple pipe.
Does that sound like something that we would put in there or be able to put it in there to work with the other agencies?
I think that might be an implementation item.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than a policy.
Yeah. So like over on the side there, Hallie, if you want to put, an implementation item.
Thanks, Bob.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good comment. Member Waller.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that most, if not all of the schools have already implemented the purple pipe. So there is a lot of it in there. It's fine leaving it to say, leave schools in there because there may be a school site or a school area that could use more. But, just know that the schools have already actually implemented this. There was a big project a number of years ago to get it to the high school. There's no reason why the city can't tee off of that pipe once it's been pushed in that area. That was a big issue, was getting them to actually get the pipe down. I don't know if it was Diamond or whatever the street was that could get to the high school. So once it's in an area, we can expand it. But the hard thing is actually getting the grants to get the pipe in the vicinity of whatever facility you want to be able to use it on.
Every cut in the street has a story.
Brad, is that line you're talking about charged, or is it just a dry purple pipe sitting out there?
It's charged. It's being used.
Okay. Member Light.
Yeah, just a couple points. First, I'm okay with the change to 6.3, except I would like to have, just to emphasize that we're talking about both types, that it's not where you struck out city, we have public and private projects and retrofits. Just to emphasize that we're not just talking city stuff. And then secondly, it still seems some folks are confused. Purple pipe is recycled water, and recycled water is water that has gone through sewage treatment and has been cleaned back up to some level of standard where it can be reused. In some cases, cities use it for drinking water even. But at the Hyperion plant, it's just for irrigation and toilets and things like that. Gray water is what comes out when you discharge a sink or a washing machine. And when they talk about using gray water, they're talking about sending it out sometimes through filtration, depends on the requirements of the agency that's overseeing the project. But it gets reused directly into landscaping uses. So gray water is different than recycled water. And that's it. That's all my comments.
Thank you, Jim.
Do we have, I think we're maybe at a place where we can go through the list of recommendations. Oh, no, we got
Sorry, I'm just, are we going to add there in the sidebar based on the discussion with Mr. Penzler for 6.3, when we talk about somewhere working with other agencies, did that get included? I'm just missing it.
Yeah, we did. It's down at the bottom, the implementation.
Oh, okay. Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay. Hallie, can you just scroll up a pinch? Okay. So We'll expand the sidebar reference to include more information on the policy, the utilities policies. Change resources to management under the goal name. Change the language under the goal to say efficiently manage the city's available water, and then continue on with that. And then under OS 6.3, revise it so it says on new public and private projects and retrofits to incorporate BMPs. So it's removing city and not just encouraging for private development, but requiring. And consideration to repurpose the city's properties. I don't know what that's.
That was the discussion of retrofitting areas like the Wiley Sump.
Okay.
Or BMPs.
Got it. So adding some language about improvements to city facilities, maybe to better incorporate BMPs.
Just BMTs, or do you want it to just improve groundwater infiltration?
That's fine to improve. Yeah, that's. And then for implementation items under 6.3, these were, I think, the items that Jim had noted previously. Update municipal code to require all new public or private development projects to incorporate groundwater infiltration best practices such as bioswales and permeable hardscape, and prioritize the use of native plants. Study and address the appropriate use and application of artificial turf. And under the CIP, incorporate bioswales into the city streets and medians where appropriate to mitigate flooding and improve infiltration. So those would be implementation items. And then, so we wouldn't have what that policy 6.5 is. It would be,
you already accommodated it. So
those are the implementation items. And then adding a policy 6.5, recycled water, expand the city's recycled water infrastructure for landscaping for parks, medians, and schools. And then for implementation work with the West Basin to expand the network, the city's.
But I'm lost on what you did with the gray water comment up above.
That should be 6.6 also.
No, 6.5 as it's written there, Nick, is turned into implementation measures and incorporated.
Yeah, I think you just delete that just so we don't have the confusion there, Holly. Thank you. So we removed the laundry to yard reference.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe it's define gray water versus recycled water. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but if you're going to do that, then 6.5 or the new 6.5 needs to be recycled water and gray water.
Okay, so let's put recycled water and gray water.
Okay.
With both of them.
Yeah. Okay.
Hallie, for that title for the new 6.5.
Do we want to add something about gray water to that policy then?
I would say, maybe it's expand the city's recycled water infrastructure and
gray water
gray water programs.
Well, you've already got in the comment, review and update the municipal code to allow use of gray water.
Yeah.
So that moved under 6.5.
One of the policies that I believe Sheila referenced in the utilities element is 6.3.13. which is to work with the city's water providers to encourage local residents, businesses, and industries to store and reuse gray water. So So that's already in the utilities element. Do we just want to add an implementation measure that would
or reference it?
Policy?
Yeah.
It is one of the policies that is referenced.
Yeah, maybe that's one of the policies we reference in that that little
expanding the narrative surrounding that reference.
Yeah. Okay.
So
did you want to have it just say recycle water here? Is that okay, Jim? Or do you want to have it say recycle water and gray water?
I think it should have both. So
Okay. Okay. So we'll do that for the time. Let me let Hallie catch up. Sorry, Hallie. Okay, so I think that we have, those are all the recommendations for under goal OS 6.
I think Sheila has a question before we move.
Because I can't read the small print here, just wanted to confirm that for 6.6, that you're referencing gray water and recycled water?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
And you know what, Hallie, that what we had here was, it was expand the city's recycled water infrastructure for landscaping for parks, medians, and schools, and in existing and new residential developments. We did want to have that in there.
And I guess while we're at it, expand the city's recycled and gray water infrastructure.
Yes.
Want to say encourage the use of gray water? Because gray water infrastructure is not.
Allow and encourage, because right now it's not legal according to the plumbers I worked with locally.
So allow and encourage gray water.
Gray water. The development of gray water, development of gray water systems.
Yep.
Yeah.
Resources.
Yeah.
Let's do systems.
Let me interject here. Are you guys talking about encouraging private gray water usage? Again, putting laundry water into their own yards? Or is this encouraging the development of gray water systems throughout the city, which we already have?
Well, I think I'll answer. I think one of the things that I think Jim brought up is if you have an outdoor shower and a plumber is required to connect that to the sewer system, I think you should have an option if you don't want that done. So I don't know if is that a building code change that we would use this policy to do? I don't think it's a plumbing code.
No, but I just don't think that's a good idea because gray water, we collect private gray water to process it and put it to places where it's required and best used. If everyone
No, we don't. It all goes in the sewer.
There's gray water systems, right? And there's gray water systems in our city that are used, right?
No.
Well, this goes.
We use gray water in the city, right, Jim?
No, we don't. No, we don't have a gray water infrastructure system. That's why we changed this to allow the use of it.
We irrigate medians and city property with gray water, correct?
No, that's recycled water, not gray water.
Yeah, recycled.
Yeah, Paul, there's not a gray water infrastructure system, but this would allow a private homeowner to choose to do this. It goes back to my discussion about the sewer treatment plant.
I understand that.
Even though I would consider watering my plants with gray water, I know that it's more important at the sewer treatment plant than for my plants outside.
Yeah, and I think it would be better if we introduce that water into those sewer systems, as opposed to encouraging it to be not used and used, privately. I don't think that's a good policy. And this was a few years ago, this got popular and it caused problems. I don't think we should, let people just disconnect their laundry and dump it into their own yard as a policy. If they want to do that and bootleg it, fine. But it's encouraging them to do that. I don't think that's a good city policy at all.
Yeah, I think there's conservation is with you, and you can set up standards and make sure it's not done inappropriately.
Well, can we consider naming that, or just saying that allowed the use of gray water systems on private property? So that way, if somebody chooses to, so it's not encouraged, but it's allowed. Jim, you talk about a shower outside. If you want to discharge that water out to your side yard, I was hoping.
Okay, I'll go with that as long as it's permitted. As long as someone has to sign off on say, yeah, okay, you have an outdoor shower, fine, that could be done that way.
Yeah, it should be built to standards. You go down to the beach, you shower off on the beach, but you can't do that at home legally.
Allow development of permitted gray water systems on private properties.
Yes. I was hoping Craig would raise his hand. Member from Nabashi, please.
Mm-hmm.
Your experience in this stuff. What happened to him? Disconnected.
Craig, you're muted.
I muted. Thank you. Gang, I think we're getting into the weeds. I mean, my thing is building codes. You don't want to go there and all these other things. I think the fact that as a committee that we encourage future development to look at this and, without getting too specific as to where the water goes and all this, that, obviously our job is to create a policy that encourages proper water management, whether it's wastewater, gray water. I mean, there's even technology within building standards that's evolving to really develop our black water conservation. But, again, I think for this policy, let's just stick to a paragraph or two that really states that the city encourages, utilizing technology or, best practices and standards to conserve and reduce wastewater. But without saying, okay, but it has to be sent to the Edward C. Little plant to then come back through Purple Pipes and all this other stuff, which that field trip I encourage all of you to do. You can actually drink the water at the end. But again, before we get into real nitty gritty of infrastructure, let's just stay as a committee on a real highline policy that encourages what we underlyingly want to do without getting into the specifics. Because Paul, you make some really valid points about, the system isn't perfected, and for us to write a policy that has to stand for 30, 40, 45, 50 years, it's got to be a little more flexible, gang. And so if we make it too rigid, we're going to regret it. So again, the underlying sentiment is to do the very best we can for conservation and good wastewater practices. And if you want to kind of leave it flexible, you might say something along the lines of using the best practices and technology available, and that way it allows the document to grow with the technology that is good. It's improving every day. It's going to be better 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and who knows? They might even change the color of the pipe. So, that's my take on it. Let's, not get too bogged down in all the specifics. Let's obviously rely on our building and safety department, and community services to develop and implement the actual codes and, plan check and all that other good stuff. And kind of stay again with the highline sentiment of what we really want to convey through this document. Okay, thanks.
No, that's a great point. So what does the policy look like now? So we reword policy 6.5? Craig, come back.
Okay. Okay, and first of all, in my opinion would be to, obviously some of this discussion is dug deep into the differences even between, public, commercial, residential. We've heard what the school district does, what the city does. I think it does take it to a totally different realm when you start putting these specific requirements on residential, which may not be reasonable yet. I mean, I don't even know how you implement a gray water system in residential construction right now. And obviously we scratched the word require, so I like that, but and I can't scroll back up. Hold on. All right, you know what? I'm gonna pull the other up on my computer so I can scroll with it. But I would say continue on if I.
Well, I mean, you bring a good point, and I think this is where once we get through this one, I think we'll be at a good spot to move on. So I don't mind waiting, or do we need to? Where do you want us to go?
He did use environmentally sound. That was a good set of words.
I guess while Craig comes back, Jim.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Please continue. I'm.
Okay. Yeah, member Light.
Yeah, I think the OS 6.1 covers the whole generic. We want to get better. I think the subsequent paragraphs get to some specifics. So I don't mind singling out some practices. We're obviously behind other communities with respect to gray water. It's been legal in California for years, but again, from my understanding, it's illegal in our city's development code. So I think it's okay to reference it here. I would strike that it's just private projects, because you may decide a park project, or like the project down at the boat ramp, the wash down, a little hand shower, had to put in a whole recovery system for the water. So it could be a public project. And other than that, I'm ready to go on this thing.
So just one, I have one. So allow development of permitted gray water systems. I think it's just water use, not systems. So I think that's sort of I think that would be the only, because it would be individual use. We're not looking at piping for gray water. So that would be on a case by case basis.
Right. And okay, I've just got my train of thought back. Thank you for your patience. I think we should even back away from the use of black water, gray water, and really just look at it as all as wastewater, so that we have proper and appropriate management of wastewater. And obviously let the specific policies as to the specifics of how that gets done be left obviously into the lower, the lower level, more specific city policies when they're doing plan check, for example, for a given project. That's just my take on it.
So policy 6.2 could read wastewater as opposed to recycled in gray, and then expand on the use of wastewater for landscaping, parks, et cetera, and then remove the last sentence that says allowed development of gray water. So that would be wastewater, and expand the use of wastewater for all these things.
Yes, and again, when we're referring to the water, I would say refer to it each time as wastewater. That encourages recycling instead of talking about recycled water. More of where our philosophy or our policy, is to take wastewater and recycle it as much as we can. So where we take wastewater and we maximize recycling and more efficient use of wastewater, something along those lines. And forgive me, I'm not as sharp this time of night, when it comes to wordsmithing, but that's kind of, I think we're more of the essence of what we want than the specifics, if that makes sense. That's just my opinion. Okay.
Member Simpson.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little confused. I mean, recycled water is not wastewater. I mean, and I think it's important that we're specific about it, and we're not getting into great detail that Greg seemed to be referring to. I think it leaves ample room to allow the appropriate ordinances and policies to be enacted. This is a broad overview of encouraging use of recycled water and then opening up the option of doing something with gray water use. And neither of those are technically, to my understanding, wastewater. I mean, perhaps you would consider gray water to be wastewater, but certainly recycled water isn't. And this seems to me to be a perfectly logical way of formulating what I understood to be the intent of most of us here.
Thank you, Member Simpson. Member Lamb.
I would agree with Mr. Simpson on this. It would be regrettable to take out gray water and recycled water because it leaves the document too broad for interpretation. And especially in policy 6.6, I would urge the committee to keep the language as stated, gray water and recycled water. Thank you very much.
Member Light.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with John and with Sheila. I don't think we should take out those specifics. If we do, then we should at the minimum include it in a specific implementation plan, because we need something to incentivize the city to invest in expanding the recycled water and to rewrite the code to permit gray water. And just putting, reuse wastewater, I don't think does that. So that's my concern. I'd rather leave it as we've got it right now. Thank you.
Mr. Funabashi, this needs to be a really good argument.
And it's not even really so much an argument, because I don't disagree with what the other members are saying, because I do feel that we do need to reference, obviously, gray water, but and recycled water. But you have to understand that recycled water isn't recycled water until it's recycled. It doesn't get used. It's wastewater first, and then it has to be processed, right? So I'm just separating the two and saying that, obviously you take the wastewater first, and then you do something with it. You either turn it into recycled water, or gray water goes out into, some other form of discharge, like we've been talking about. Sometimes it goes out into the backyard. That's all I'm saying, just to clarify the use of the water, and to obviously tighten up our document so that it doesn't. But that's my argument. Just understanding the difference between.
Okay, I think this meets the spirit of what we're trying to say without going into more detail. So
Nick, if I may, could we, Brandy, and maybe you'll do it, summarize this a little bit more succinctly? After the last half hour or so, I'm a little confused on what exactly we want to say.
Yeah, so everything else that was already mentioned is going to stay the same, except for the new policy OS 6-5 would be recycled and gray water, expand the city's recycled water infrastructure for landscaping for parks, medians, schools, and existing and new residential uses, allow development of permitted gray water use. Implementation, do we have implementation here? I can't read it. Hallie, it's a little cut off.
So implementation would be review and update the municipal code to allow and regulate the use of gray water for landscaping, remove private properties. And then also work with West Basin, the city's Purple Pipe partner, to expand the network.
Yeah.
Is that a good summary for you, Vice Chair Sanchez?
Yeah, without belaboring it. Yeah, that's fine.
Member Light.
Just one nit, 165, the new residential uses, I just think should be private uses. I know there's projects we saw the Galleria as a private development that isn't residential.
Instead of it saying residential, saying private uses.
Yeah, and existing and new private uses.
So how it would be replacing residential with private.
You want to keep existing and new, or just make it private?
But I mean, landscaping, okay, no, never mind. No, that's fine. Got it. All right. Can we entertain a motion?
No move.
All right.
Second.
Okay. So we have a motion on how Randy read the summary by Member Eller, seconded by Member Light. Lena, take us home on this vote.
Okay, all those in favor voting yes, use your raise hand function. This is for voting yes. 18, 19. So it looks like 19 yes. 20, there's 20. Okay, if you go ahead and lower hands. And then just to verify, are there any no's? Anyone voting no? Is there still one hand up?
Member McKenzie.
Oh, Member McKenzie, are you voting no?
Oops, I meant to take that down.
Yeah. Okay. Very
No,
good.
she is not voting no.
So no, there were no votes.
Okay, so hearing none, so ordered. We move on to biological resources.
Correct. Thank you, Chair. This is our last goal and set of policies. And if you could scroll through that. Okay, biological resources. The goal, OS7, an enhanced ecosystem comprised of a thriving urban forest, protected habitat for biological resources, especially native, sensitive, and special status wildlife species to foster the well-being of the community and offer a reprieve from the built environment. And then we have, how many policies do we have on this, Hallie? We have 4 originally drafted with 2 additional policies that have been offered from committee member Light.
Yeah, and we will have 2 additional proposed by committee member Lamb.
So we have some edits proposed. It looks like on policy OS1, protect and expand critical habitats. Just a slight, addition of expanded, coordinating with other agencies as well, surrounding jurisdictions, regional agencies. We can move to the next policy.
Hold on real quick. I just want to make sure I get this right. Sheila, was yours, like you had adding use area, and it says plans, but I don't know if you meant plants, as a means to complete wildlife corridors. I'm not quite sure if that was something you were adding to, because it was under protect.
Yes, under goal OS7, policy OS1, protect critical habitats, use area plans as a means to complete wildlife corridors. I think our wildlife corridors are really important to us. And how do we bring those to greater awareness? And one way to do that would be to create an area plan for these corridors. There, I think a select group of people sort of know what these, the most interested group of people know what these areas are, right? Know what the corridors are, but to be able to make that more public, to be able to bring it forth to more awareness and attention through an area plan, I think would be helpful. I think it's helps us as residents, as humans, to feel connected with the natural environment. And that's one way, and that could be one way of doing it.
Yeah, so I see that while you were explaining that, Hallie had added as a implementation item to develop a wildlife corridor area plan. Does that work for you?
Yes, okay, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Sure.
Just for consideration, maybe also adding that after expanded and connected where feasible.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Could I ask, what is the definition of a wildlife corridor as? Which wildlife?
So are you asking me?
Sure.
So, for example, the El Segundo blue butterfly, there's a corridor for them. I think Jim may know more than I do. We're on a corridor for several bird species. So really becoming more cognizant of these flyaway, these fly corridors, I think is really valuable for residents.
Okay, so it's pertaining to migratory birds and insects.
That's right. That's right.
And
No, they're not all migratory, but they need habitat.
Okay. So,
Right, and we're on a pathway for them.
We're on a
great. And it's probably pretty long established with the El Segundo blue butterfly.
Yeah.
The problem I see is I support, wildlife in the expansion of coyotes around here. They're a keystone predator around here, and they're doing a lot to keep other vermin from overpopulating. And that's something I see as being a problem because we don't have a big definition of what a wildlife corridor is. Somebody's out there is going to say, well, I'd say it myself, we should plan for the expansion of coyote wildlife around here and their turf because they're coming back. See what I mean? So, the wildlife corridors are great when they're cute little animals or pretty animals, but animals are animals and wildlife is wildlife. So we probably should define that.
Is there an objection to including coyotes and understanding their corridor, that they could be included in wildlife in this issue, right, of wildlife corridors?
Yeah, but there's a lot of people who are very against coyotes, but coyotes really are, again, they're what's known as a keystone predator around here. And they're coming back because of the proliferation of squirrels and smaller animals, and because they just gotten out of control. There's a lot more squirrels here than there was 20 years ago. And so the coyotes have come back because there's lots of food, and it's their turf, So I'm all for wildlife corridors. If we just want to say for birds, flying insects or flying birds or whatever, but wildlife is a super broad term that we should define a bit because we're going to ruffle some feathers. What a phrase.
Sure.
Throw some fur too.
Member Gaddis.
Yeah, if you just go into Wikipedia and look up wildlife corridor, it's very well defined. So I recommend everyone look at that for before we put it into the document. I'm personally in favor of it, but it is defined. It's not a nebulous term.
Rob, can you summarize that definition?
Yeah, it's an area of habitat connecting wildlife populations separated by human activities or structures, such as roads, development, or logging, allowing an exchange of individuals between populations. And it goes on a bit, but they illustrate it. It's to encourage, population, biodiversity, and so, yeah, colonization, migration, prevents inbreeding. And as you know, California is building those bridges over the 101 and some other roads to allow, connectivity between populations, specifically ones I've been reading about are mountain lions between those areas north of the 101 freeway and the ones that are in the Malibu Mountains because of to encourage biodiversity and increase the populations. So anyway, I do encourage everyone to sort of pull it up on Wikipedia. It's well defined and it's a good idea. And I agree with you, Paul, coyotes too.
Yeah, it's well defined, but it's incredibly broad, and they're building basically bridges over freeways for 25 mountain lions in LA County. That's literally it. There's only 25. So we just got to know that this is what we mean when we say wildlife corridor. We mean like all wildlife.
Member Solomon.
Thank you, Chair Bureau. Respectfully, Paul, I don't know that we should try to get too deep into the weeds of defining that. When you consider the biology and the environment in which we live, there are tens of thousands of different species of insects and all manner of species of wildlife. And if we try to segment those that are considered now nuisance animals or not nuisance animals, as highlighted there by Haley, threatened and endangered species, or if you try and do that, I mean, wildlife biologists in and around Southern California, whether it be in the oceans or on land or in the mountains or in the deserts, catalog all of these things. I think personally, I think you'd be better suited having it as a broader term than a more narrowly defined term, because you're always going to find something to try and exclude, whether it be, if it's not coyotes, then is it snakes? If it's not snakes, then is it birds of prey? If it's not birds of prey, is it some other variety? I just don't know that you can segment it down that much in a document like this. So I respectfully disagree with the I understand what you're saying. I just disagree with the idea if we try and pick and choose what we're going to exclude there.
So do I, but I'm bringing it up because the term wildlife corridor encompasses everything and it's always changing. So once we say something like wildlife corridor and we don't define it in any way, it's going to, people are going to say, well, I don't want coyotes, because they eat my dog or whatever comes next. So
but it changes for a variety of different reasons. It's more of a word of
caution to everyone that we're putting in this really broad term that does change. We didn't have coyotes or a big coyote population 15 years ago.
There are coyotes all over the United States. There are coyotes in Central Park.
I know.
There are coyotes in Griffith. There are coyotes in Griffith Park.
It's only now that people are starting to trap them and kill them, telling cities to get rid of them.
But their patterns change.
Young, but I've seen them in foxes around here all my life. It's just we include the raccoons in the sewers. But
all these patterns change based on rainfall totals, based on heat, based on migratory patterns. What you mentioned before, exploding populations of attractive food sources, things like that. It sounds to me like what you're asking is whether or not we included it at all, as opposed to having it in there with a broad term. Is that what you're asking?
I'm not asking. It's a word of caution. Once we put that term in there, it's pretty loaded. And I'm all for it. Believe me.
If I may just pop in here, where we're talking about the wildlife corridor was as an implementation item. Just to clarify. I mean, it's not to say, I don't mean to discourage a discussion on it, but I just want to be clear that we're not adding that into the actual policy so much as an implementation item to work on a wildlife corridor area plan. And, it seems like there's a lot that would have to go into what that plan would be. And so I just want to put that out there.
Okay, let's get the rest of the comments. Member Sharzan.
Yeah, I'd just like to see in here also that we maximally have these resources open and available to the public. For example, the Wilderness Park has very restricted hours, which I've never understood. So just maximizing those natural resources to be available to the public. I remember as a parent having little kids, Wilderness Park opening at 10 a.m., your day's half over. So something in there to make them maximally available to the public.
Thank you. Member Funabashi.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I did just what Member Gaddis had suggested and quickly looked up. It's a distinct difference between critical habitat and wildlife corridor, wildlife being the broader, how animals obviously migrate, right? But the fact that our document says critical habitat, it really does define it actually outside the realm of our city. It really is essential, the conservation of listed species, actually designated within the U.S. So it's part of the Endangered Species Act. And in fact, I seem to recall even the blue butterfly, when the Highlands by LAX were developed, it was because there was a critical concern that we were going to lose that blue butterfly, and even Chevron got behind it and everything. So I think the fact that we're stating with that, we do want to be mindful of protecting and expanding the critical habitats. Obviously, it'd be interesting, and we wouldn't obviously identify what those animals are in our document, but now it's kind of piqued my curiosity. Some were obviously named, and we've even seen some pretty exotic birds and unique species down at the harbor and everything. But I don't think I'm worried too much about it getting out of hand when we really just look at critical habitat. I think is the perfect word to describe what we want to protect and expand. And while I can appreciate that it was suggested that we might actually look at the wildlife corridor, that's how you identify what the critical habitat is, right? So I like it the way it's written.
Member Boise.
Yeah, actually, some of the things I was going to say have already been said, so I think I don't want to belabor things. I can shorten it, but to Paul's point, as far as maybe there is something to say about invasive or something that would be negative to the environment. I'm looking at the Wikipedia page that was suggested, and it goes right into it, right? What if they actually aid in the spread of disease and catastrophic events? Invasive species can take over an area that could potentially threaten other species, even to a point of extinction. So things to think about on that too, because I think that's where Paul was trying to get to, as far as we just got to be careful in wording and how we do it and what we invite, but also realize that there are predators in there. The other thing I wanted to raise was really, and my apologies, I may have just had a moment there. We specifically referenced the city of Hermosa on 7.1. What is there a specific reason to that, or would it be better to say our neighboring cities so that we're more inclusive? Because this is going to change over time. Hermosa may have some things right now that we really like, but what says that Torrance or up in PV or anyone else that we want to bridge into as well and coordinate? So maybe just change that to neighboring cities.
I agree with that. I think that's too specific.
Can I speak to that momentarily?
Good point.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why, and not saying that we shouldn't change it, but one of the reasons why Hermosa was specifically called out here is because there is an existing critical habitat directly adjacent to the city border at King Harbor. And so coordination right now with Hermosa is important, but
yeah, I think I maybe add that as neighboring cities. As an example, city of Hermosa might be a little wider.
Yeah, because it doesn't discourage any coordination with everybody else around us. So.
Right, because we talk county regional agencies, but we don't talk about our neighbors.
Member Gaddis.
Thanks for clarification.
Member Gaddis, your hand's still up. Member Voisey, your hand's still up. Brandy or Sean, do you wish to?
Okay, so I want to make sure that we covered everything here. So we just the 7.1, we've gone through that. Hallie, would you mind scrolling down and over a little bit? Yeah, so we have here 7.4, adding prioritize native trees. Hold on.
Right, I'm just adding.
Okay, I'm going to go through these other things while Hallie's doing that. We had prioritized native trees and associated companion species and habitats. We added the recommendation from Jim Light was to add 7.5, continue current restoration efforts, support continuation and expansion of current habitat restoration efforts on the coastal bluff and at Wilderness Park. And then adding policy 7.6. Prioritize AES wetlands and SCE right of way next to Redondo's. Is that avenue? I can't. Street avenue.
It doesn't say, but yes.
Okay. For reintroduction of native habitats. Work with the new owner of AES property, SCE, the Coastal Conservancy, and other agencies to reestablish a wetland. I think it's supposed to be wetlands surrounded by native habitat on the AES property and native habitat on SCE right of way next to Redondo Avenue. There we go. And then I think for this next one would be the implementation item.
Hey, Brandy.
The city should prioritize acquisition of mini storage facilities between the AES power plant and SCE right away to ensure connectivity of the two sites. So I think connectivity with, that's the implementation item. And one other quick one, under 7.4, this was a recommendation by committee member Lamb. To add maximize and maintain tree canopy on public lands and open spaces. Maximize and, oh, you got it. Perfect. Okay, so those are the recommendations.
And Brandy, when we had initially gone through Jim's recommendations here, the only issue that we had was just that last portion of the policy 7.6 to make that an implementation.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I'm sorry if I got a little caught off. I think
no. Otherwise, staff was really we were good with the policy.
Mm-hmm. And then I see that what Hallie was adding was to allow public access to encourage public awareness to the extent feasible under that education component, and that was to Leslie's point. So.
We've got two more comments. So, Member Light.
Yeah, I'm okay with putting that last sentence into an implementation plan. I agree. The one strikeout you had to the Coastal Conservancy, that's a typo on my part. I meant to put in for one of those the Coastal Commission, since they deemed, that there to be active wetlands on the AES
Okay,
site.
so where you deleted the Coastal Conservancy, have it say the Coastal Commission?
Yeah. And other than that, I'm good with everything you stated. Thanks.
Member Sanchez, Vice Chair Sanchez.
So just, I don't know how strongly we want to fight, or let me just say it. So earlier, Member Funabashi brought up things about specifically naming certain agencies or businesses or whatever. Do we want to continue to do that specifically here, considering this is a document that, it's feasible, or hopefully not, but in 15 years, South Bay Conservancy might be named something else and might have a different mission. Do we want to be specific about naming some of these things, or should these be put into parentheses like Hallie did further up?
Yeah, that was actually that 7.3. That's how it is written currently in our element. So it does have it written that way. I think under 7.6, certainly, because we do need to acknowledge which sites we're talking about. So talking about the AES, new owner of the AES property, SCE, it's not as specific as talking to a very specific human being, but acknowledging that those are the sites that we want to address. As far as South Bay Conservancy, it's up to you guys if you want to have that just in parentheses. It's just giving an example. It's not limiting.
Member Sharzan. You're muted.
I appreciate the comment on 7.3, but it's not just awareness and education, but just access by the public.
Yeah, so she put that to allow public access.
Okay, but just for the pure purpose of having public access to those public lands.
Okay, so I think that you don't have to say why.
Yeah.
Hallie.
I'm sorry for breaking in, but we got to be careful where there's things like the snowy plover. They actually block public access. So I just want to make sure we're understanding what we're saying when we say that.
What blocks access?
You can't get near a snowy plover nesting area when there's active nests. And if we find burrowing owls, we'll want to rope off that area.
Yeah. So to the extent feasible, then makes good sense. Yeah.
Member Boise.
Yeah, I just want to echo the one thing, and similar to what I said about Hermosa. I think any specific references to agencies or something that's not like a government agency or anything like that, I think we could use them as examples, but maybe be more generic in those, because we're talking about a document that could live on, and somebody could be reading this as in, what is this? Right? And same thing goes for the AES wetlands, SCE right away. 20 years from now, are they still going to be really called that? There's a new owner. Maybe it's just referring to the parcel of land, or the former site of, or something like that. That wouldn't work because it's still there, but you know what I mean, where I don't think we should actually have the specifics of companies like was suggested.
Yeah, it could just say work with the property owners of these.
Excellent. Yeah, exactly. Because I just foresee this. This has to live on. This has to have something to keep going. And these are entities that can and will change. And AES is no longer their property by then.
Yeah. So I think Hallie, what is the work with the new property owners of the no, I wouldn't even put that because it's not going to be a power plant.
The former site of the power plant might be just
or of the property,
or former site,
but it's
wetlands.
It's not a former site. It's not a former site yet, though. So
that's where I got stuck. Right.
The second part.
Name it as the parcel of land that the county recognizes it as.
Yes. I think we should do something like that.
And the public
So maybe it's, the work with the property owners of these sites.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? It's not even AES. They don't even own it, right? We could actually.
That's why I said it. Because they do not own it. They're leasing it now.
Right. We could say that it is. I mean, what do we all affectionately call it? The power plant at the harbor, or the harbor power plant, or
Old power plant.
Wailing Wall.
We're not saying former. We're not saying former, but the historical power plant.
We don't affectionately call it.
Well, we could say
Lake,
the property, comma, currently a power plant, because it is functional, but not a lot. It is old.
Yeah.
But obviously to give flexibility to the document, we have to write it as it is now with enough wiggle room for it to expand. So I'm thinking something along the lines is the property currently used as a power plant.
Or which has been used as a
2022.
power plant since 19 whatever.
Right.
Well,
Yeah,
we don't
we
even have to
can't
put
say
that much.
currently, because eventually you're going to read this policy and it's not there. That's the point.
So historically was used as a power plant beginning in 1920 whatever that was.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, we got to wordsmith
You could even,
You gotta
and
wordsmith
that's
it.
why I said you could even include something of, going like the
At the
former
time-
/power plant property.
Power plant, right.
Pacific Electric?
Or why not say something like there's that monument marker down there that recognized it as a Chumash Salt Lake. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, the former site of the Salt Lake. I like that.
The Chumash or whatever it is. If you want to be specific, there you go.
Yeah,
I would suggest we throw in the tribe name there. That makes it very specific.
I think it's when you say Salt Lake, that's specific enough.
Well, I think that if you add that makes it more specific. That's my opinion.
It's Gabrielino Chawinga.
Yeah, because we could get into Chuigna and yeah.
It's recognized on the marker down there.
Yeah, but
that's what I'm suggesting.
Wait,
Let's not go there.
Let's keep one person talking. Vice Chair Sanchez, anything else?
No.
Member Samaras.
I was just gonna suggest keep calling it what everybody knows it as today. So AES power plant property. And in the future, somebody can always come and update the reference if they no longer understand what it is. Yeah. There's planning documents everywhere in many cities that, have old references, and, in 20 years, when somebody updates the open space element, they'll update that reference.
Good point. Thank you, Member Samaras. Member Eller.
If you put American Indian references with the current environment of returning land, you could open the city to someone claiming that land and removing it from the city ownership.
Good point. Member Gaddis.
Yeah, the Salt Lake was about 15 acres. The current, the power plant property is 50 acres. So I think Salt Lake is way too specific. And I think if you just put old power plant property, that's pretty well encompassing. There's been a power plant there since, I believe, the early 20th century. So it's about 120 years it's been there. So I would say old power plant property, and people will get the reference for a long time.
That's a good way to do that. Member Baga.
Yeah, I agree with Member Samaras about having the reference as a power plant, which is what it's currently known as.
Okay. So let's go with that. Let's go with the power plant. Let's see. Member Gaddis, your hand's still up.
Oh, sorry. Well, I meant old power plant property, not just power plant.
Okay, the old power plant. Well, it's still active, so it's still a power plant property.
Maybe just add the year.
It's old. Well, yeah, okay, it is old. Okay, yeah,
If we keep on at this speed, we'll be at the 2025 election.
I was gonna say, we're all getting old.
Member Pisler, take us home, please. Help us out.
It's okay. I'm satisfied with what I see here.
Oh, all right. So we got two more comments. Member Simpson.
I was going to make a motion that we accept it as it's been outlined, but maybe I'm premature.
Perfect. I will second that.
Is that the goal and policies, the whole shebang? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, all of OS 7, 1, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
With the revisions. Okay.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second.
Hold on real quick. I just want to make sure we got Sheila's. We're good. Okay.
Lena.
All right. All those in favor, use your raise hand function to vote yes. Okay, 13, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. Okay, I think that's everyone. Go ahead and lower hands. And then is there anyone that votes no? Okay, seeing none voting no.
Look at us. We're getting really
Who do we have for, I'm sorry, who moved and seconded on that? John, you moved?
I moved.
Yeah, and I seconded.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so gone through the goals and policies. I think Sean had a slide in the presentation. So Hallie, if we could go back to that summarize, because we had the
we've got some minor changes that we're going to
the minor changes.
There's some minor changes from what the working version that committee member Light has worked for us on. And I summarized those on a slide. It's just fairly minor. And we can just run through them really quickly. It might not be easy to do though without seeing the document though. I'm not sure if this really works, to be honest. I can certainly explain it, but they are fairly minor. They were about a little more concise, taking some direction we had at prior meetings. And we added Zuliger Park photo and a note on the bottom of page OS 3, and we can maybe see that when we run through it. Updated references at the end of setting the Parkland Standard Quimby Act photo and note on the bottom of OS 8. Added other open spaces to the title of one of the sections, 7.2.2 public spaces on OS 9. It was important to get the open spaces reference on the title. Added other open spaces discussion after streetlets. So we kind of moved some things around on page OS 12. And then added coastal bluffs to table OS 2, public open spaces and other open spaces. So that it's not part of our park acreage table, but public spaces and other public and other open spaces. We added coastal bluffs to that. Deleted the section discussion under parks next door on page OS 15 from working draft version. And it's covered under other open spaces. So we took the reference to parks next door out of it. And then added a couple of sections down at the very end of the document to the regional and local plans. This was a recommendation from Commissioner, I think, committee member Hannon, I want to say, on bikes, on adding the Redondo Beach Living Streets policy in the local plan section and the South Bay plan in the regional plan discussions at the very end of the element. And that was it.
Okay, Member Pisler.
A couple of minor things. in one of the graphics, you used a Google Maps as your example because it had the name of the street on it. Google Maps is copyrighted. So it's not something that you should be using in this unless you get permission to use it. And that's almost impossible to get anyway. And also there are some other graphics that are things that don't exist or likely will not exist. You have a picture of the skate park that was proposed for the Galleria, which ain't going to happen. So you might want to look over the graphics and make sure that what you are showing are real. And if they're not real, and if they are
speculative
intimations of what's going to happen, you should state that. And not make someone assume that what you're showing actually exists.
That's a good point. Well,
okay.
Do we want to look at the element?
We don't have to go over all of it. I can send you any notes that I make on this, but that's just something to protect from copyright issues.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's not scroll through this thing yet. Member Voisey. You're muted. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Thank you very much. And I think I may have jumped ahead of Jim there, but like that is, I do believe you can use the Google Maps for government agencies. I've actually done work with them in the past. So that's something, it's a good point, but I think it's something that somebody should check into. I think it is actually allowed.
Member Light.
Yeah, just a couple nits. OS 10 has a picture that's labeled the Esplanade, but it's not really the Esplanade. It's the path that's below the condominiums that are on the Esplanade. So I think, most people wouldn't think that's the Esplanade Bluff Walk. So that's a nit. Second, there's a table somewhere in here where you were adding up parkland that had an asterisk, but then there was no reference, there was no footnote to go to for the asterisk to understand why it was asterisked.
Where was that at, Jim? I'm sorry.
It's in one of the, I'll try to find it.
We have, so these were the things other than what Jim's other than what Jim's changes were. And
yeah,
you have a whole lot, Jim. We just scroll through and.
But our goal tonight's not to scrub through the document, though.
No, because we're going to still have edits, and we'll go through and hopefully catch some of those. But if there are some of those edits, like small little, like you're saying, nits, Jim, that you guys are catching when when you've read through it, just shoot those over to us, because those are not things that we need to vote on. It's just corrections and cleanup.
And then my last one, I can't find it anymore in the working document, but was in the original. It was a discussion of who's paying for the Esplanade Bluff restoration, and that was inaccurate, and I can provide you the correct information.
That would be great. Thank you.
In fact, U.S. Fish and Wildlife that's funding it now. And it's the, up till recently, it was the LA Conservation Corps doing it, and now SBPC is taking it over and working with LACC.
We'll have plenty of opportunities to do further scrubbing. What's next? I think we have one more public comment. Do we have anybody that's been patient?
I just want to make sure, is everybody okay with these changes? And were there any additional comments that we needed to address on the larger document?
There's no further comments. Do we?
Nick, really quick, I think what Jim Light was referring to on the asterisks is on page, page 28, summary of public spaces. So that's where to go.
Awesome, thank you. So can we do, I know it's one more vote and I apologize for that, but can we do a motion to accept these recommendations for revisions?
I'll make that.
Oh, sorry, Nick.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second. Lena, please.
All those in favor of voting yes, use your raise hand function. 19, 20. Okay, go ahead and lower hands. Is there anyone voting no? Just to confirm. Okay, and seeing none, voting no.
We're a voting machine tonight. Fine-tuned machine.
Okay, so next slide, I think, is the public comment. Do we have any public comment, Lena?
So we don't have anyone else signed up to speak, and there are no additional e-comments. So no additional public comment.
Jim, you have your hand raised.
Well, before we close on that, there was a whole bunch of definitions and stuff we recommended putting in the front. When do we look at that? You've got it in the working copy, but there's no detail on it. Is that a separate session, or when do we get to that kind of stuff?
Well, one of the things we talked about is just at the end of that we're going to be going through, and as we all sign off on our work with the general plan, that I think we're going to get one crack at doing one more review at this.
I think what Jim's referring to was our final run through of his comments and the group agreeing or not agreeing to ratify or approve, and then the element itself in total is then.
Sean, you cut off at the element in total.
Okay, so I think Jim's referring to his edits proposed for the actual element. The group hasn't ruled on those.
Oh, okay. So where is that on the presentation?
That's the working document, and it's just it's the underlined versions like his edits to the policies.
Can we have that as part of a presentation so we can see it, so we're not going through the document?
Yeah.
Okay. So Jim, can we have that included in our next meeting so it's a presentation item?
Yeah, I just wondered how we're going to get to it. We had a lot of discussion on, the definitions in our very first regrouping on this. And then it's listed here under the working document, but I don't know that we agreed to do anything with it. So that's my main area. The other nits, I think we can pick up, or we've already covered under the policies.
I may recommend, or I would recommend we look at those, if that's the only thing remaining, Jim, that you'd want to discuss on the overall element. I think, our goal is to approval from the GPAC on the open space and conservation element in total.
Okay, so we sort of would like, do I need to check with the whole group to see if we can go past 10 o'clock? So how long do you think that?
What else do we still have to do here? I'm a little bit confused. What are we saying we would do this?
It's the Hallie. It's the working document and the Jim Light proposed edits.
But it's not on the presentation. I think that's what we're all confused.
Yeah, it's the same document we were working on for. Yes,
Isn't that what didn't we get all of the? Isn't that what we were considering all night long? I guess weren't those Jim's comments?
Those are the policies. This is the actual element.
Could this be considered part of the agenda?
Absolutely.
It is. It's attached to the agenda with all of Jim's.
And we have recommendations. Staff has recommendations on what Jim is proposed. And I don't think there's a whole lot, Jim. Do you disagree, or what do you?
Yeah, 7.2 is the main one. There's some other nits where I think he left out some stuff that we can get to in editorial details, and I didn't get to look whether you accepted them or not, but I guess you're proposing all of these definitions go somewhere else, and yet we talked quite a bit on this in our very first regrouping meeting, that you need to get the public on common terms, and I don't necessarily agree with an implementation action on it.
Okay. So yeah, the definitions, what staff has put forward is not these definitions. So it'd be up to the group to want to include these in the element.
Well, we use these terms throughout the document, and yet there's not one place where we say, when we say a park, this defines a park, right? This defines what a public space is, right? Because it's open to different interpretation, and this was the discussion. We got into a lengthy discussion the first night we came back, and then we kind of tabled it.
But no, I'm terribly confused. You're saying those things need to be defined, correct?
Correct.
And there's no definitions currently that have been proposed?
There are discussion or narratives for our different park types, and those are included in the in the element that you've all had. Regional parks, if you just scroll through, those are what we've determined to be our parks definitions.
So if you go back up,
we agreed that there was that the different types of parks were defined, but we never defined what's the difference between a park and a public space and an open space. And that confuses a lot of people as we're going through this. It confused me as I was reading it because it seems like we have changing definitions depending on where it occurs in the document.
Okay, so we don't have a comparison right now, at least on the presentation, of what the recommended definition is for a park, and Jim, what your recommended language is.
Well, I didn't give recommended that. I just said it needs definition because I didn't want to pretend to understand what the staff was recommending for you.
So without a doubt, we need them, but we don't have something to look at right now.
That's correct.
Okay, so
right now, the staff recommendation is we'll do that in an implementation plan, but I think it needs to be part of this document so that people can read it and understand it from the start.
well, then we need to direct staff to offer suggestions, or we need to write them ourselves. And I certainly don't see how we're going to be able to write them tonight.
Yeah. I agree. I totally agree.
I agree with that as well. So, and
Nick, I'm good till midnight.
All right.
Not me.
Okay. If staff wants, I'll take a cut at defining it, but I would hope they have a definition.
I'm gonna take a line from some old meetings, and I'm the one now that has to get up at 5. So, so I don't think this is something we're going to be able to go through and define all of these things tonight. So I know that there's urgency to get this wrapped up, but this is bigger than just some quick definition. So I don't see why we can't, Brandy, and to help me out here, is this something that we can complete at our next meeting and have definitions, or do we can this be sent out and us provide the definitions and have a side-by-side comparison of the comments? So we send this out.
Yeah, you mean have the definition?
Yeah.
Definitions, get them to everybody in advance so everybody can.
Yeah, no, we'll send them out as definitions that you're proposing to the whole GPAC. Everybody puts their comments back. And
staff is not proposing definitions. So what we have in the element is what's been proposed since, December 11th, 2019.
Okay.
There's no definition. It's just narrative.
Well, it describes the different types of parks. That's a definition.
Yeah, but what's the difference between a park and an open space?
So I think Jim is suggesting put it in the document to keep it in there. And I think that's just a referral to staff. I think we could take a vote if we wanted to say, hey, do we agree to put it in? I think it's going to probably pass anyhow, but I think that might be worth it. And then you guys come up with that, add it to the end of the document, and then we can go through and edit and review it in the next meeting. Does that sound logical?
No, that does. We have three comments. Let me get those 3 comments, and then we'll move from there.
And before, I wasn't quite done. We got into a lot of discussion, but the other major thing that I had in there was the definition of the walking distance, the parks, and that map. It appears that if we labeled it a park, even though it's a parkette, we counted it, and that just doesn't seem equitable. And I think it paints a false picture.
Okay, let's see, Member Lamb. Let's go through some.
So this issue of definitions has come up in the land use element as well. And as a general policy, if you look at other cities' elements, or if you even look at our municipal code, there's a section for definitions. So it's not, so I think it's common use to have a section for definitions. And I think it would be beneficial for all of us and anyone who reads this document to have a consistent location for definitions, both in the land use element and in the open space and conservation element. I think it's useful. I think it's clarifying, and it's very helpful for the reader. So especially readers who are not professionals. So it's just a very good communication tool. So my recommendation would be that we come back to the issue of definitions at our next meeting. It's a rollover item. It's not a C, right? It's a rollover item. I think that is possible for us. Thank you.
Member Funabashi.
Thank you. I totally agree with fellow member Lamb, and it seems to me that if we come up with part of our document being definitions, or dare I say a glossary of terms, but I think the definition should come from an outside reliable source, one who defines what a park is. I mean, whatever the official recognized one paragraph or one sentence, as brief as it can be. I got to tell you, as somewhat of a lay person, I kind of think of a park as being open space, but I know open space isn't always a park. So in understanding what the experts in urban land planning, or there's these associations that come up with these nationally, if not internationally recognized terms, again, there may be some copyright or whatever, but let's, and I'm putting this on staff, that basically we just need to get the definitions for the words or terms that we would want to see in this document as residents reading it, so that it makes it easy to understand. You know, you're probably all familiar with reading documents where you'll be in the middle of a paragraph and there's the word, a series of words that are in italics, and down at the footnote, it'll say refer to the glossary, or there'll be a number by it or whatever. Again, I think maybe in the typeset of this, when it comes to these words that are in the definition, maybe we somehow, with a certain font or italics or whatever, make it stand out a little bit, so that anyone reading the document can go right to the glossary of terms and know what a park is, or open space, or wildlife habitat, or corridor. You know, I mean, there's obviously recognized definitions to everything we've been talking about. Granted, it makes the document longer, but I think it makes it fuller and really answers the questions that people will have about what terms are we referring to. And at the end of the day, we want to remove all the ambiguity and go back to what's generally accepted practices, right? So I would support any motion that would direct staff to come up with a glossary or of terms or definition to incorporate into our document.
Okay, that's a good, we have one more comment, and I think we need to entertain a motion, and maybe that's the motion at this point. So Member Voisey.
Yep. And I think I'm not disagreeing with anyone. I think the two things here is I'm a firm believer in let's not reinvent the wheel. If the definitions exist, they should exist for the citywide. We should refer to that. It may not make sense. I think this is where Sean was going with it, where we actually acknowledge and link it back in the day of we are now, where we can link to it. If you go in, we brought up the Wikipedia reference earlier. If you wanted to see what the definition was, it's going to actually have a little footnote, but it's going to link you to the site where, it's a living document. Now, the other alternative to that is if we wanted to say, no, that can change. That's not what our document means. Then yes, maybe we put it in here at the bottom and say, at the point this was written, here are the definitions that stood, right? To make sure that. But again, I think that's where Sean was going. These are terms that are already defined. That's not in our group to redefine the wheel here and make sure these terms are set. The city should have these, and I think that's what we need to hear about in the next meeting.
Okay, I think Sean and Brandy, I think it's pretty clear. I guess we need a definition to the group, and I think this is a group assignment to provide comments back. And that I hate to call it 23C, but 23C will be
and I don't think we're going to call it a 23C.
Okay, so we'll be 24.
Because if we're coming back for just this for a meeting,
No,
really not meeting our deadline here.
All right, so 24, we'll just have to complete our assignment here, this last piece. So we'll have this be our first item for our next meeting and encourage everybody to get your comments in. If we can do this in less than a month, that before our agenda comes out, so maybe in 2 weeks to the whole group, we get our comments and that everybody has everything in within a week. So our agenda packet has the definitions for open space with our comments and maybe sort of narrow down on what we think that can be. So we can go through it and hammer these out. So, I would expect that going through what's going to be at least 6 definitions will be about an hour's worth of time or so. And I guess that's a motion.
A point of clarification.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you suggesting that the members come up with the definitions, or are you referencing Mr. Funabashi's, committee member Funabashi's suggestion that these be recognized or well-defined outside definitions?
I think PlaceWorks and staff should provide definitions for us to review and provide comments, and those comments be, I have a feeling that the collaboration between staff and PlaceWorks should provide an accurate definition, and there should be very little room for comments. But if there's something that this group can identify that is worth discussing, we will discuss. But I think the definition should be robust enough that should warrant very little comment.
And you're talking about, Nick, that we would distribute it in advance of the meeting so that you can provide some written comments back to us. We can make sure that we have everybody's comments.
Yes.
For that conversation. Yeah, and I think that's what he meant, Sheila, about your comments back to us would be on what we get to you.
Yes, thank you.
So that was my motion.
Was it seconded? I'll second it if it wasn't.
Yeah. Okay, I was going to do that.
Lena, one more.
Okay, all those in favor, use your raise hand function. 16, 17, 18, 19, 19. Maybe we lost someone or let's see. Okay, so 19, yes. So go ahead and lower hands. And then any voting no, go ahead and raise your hand. Okay. Member Nafisi? Or no? Okay.
Yes, if you could get me for a yes. I couldn't.
For a yes, sorry about that.
Yes,
got it.
sorry.
Okay,
That's okay.
so 20 yeses. Okay, perfect. All right, and then none voted no. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Do we have anything else tonight?
Well, I would hope would just be a motion to adjourn, which I would make.
Let's.
Back in.
Nick, before we do that, just a note for bookkeeping. I lost my internet connection during roll call, so they may want to go back and say that I was disconnected, but I was here at this meeting.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. And Lena, please, we'll make note that Member Moses was here.
We do have, Hallie, if you wouldn't mind going back to the presentation, because we do have
Might be another slide.
next steps. Yeah.
Okay. And while we pulled that up, Member Samras had a comment.
No, I just wanted to ask, are we doing another set of public comments after the presentation? Is
Yeah,
there-
we were at, we didn't have any public comments when we got to that slide. But Lena, can you just double check? Is there anybody?
No, there's no additional public comment.
Okay. And then next slide.
Great, yeah. So this is our next steps for this element after we get the definitions sorted out. Package the recommendations for the final document review. So it'll be included with the final document review this summer. Community meeting 4, final draft document goals and policies in the summer and fall, again, inclusive of this element. And then it goes on to the Planning Commission and City Council for the adoption hearings later in 2022 on that express timeline we're trying to hit.
And then next slide.
And that is our next tentative.
We don't have a date yet. We want to work through what a little bit on our schedules here, but we're looking probably in that. Let me see if I've got my calendar. I think we are looking at more in that, if we can, like the week of the 7th. If not, and then maybe having something the 31st when we normally would have had a meeting. Normally is all relative at this point, but and then so we're trying to get it a little more frequently at that point. So just stay tuned. We'll be reaching out for availability probably in the next week or so for that early March date. And it's going to be Zoom. I wouldn't expect that we're going to be in person. If we are, count me wrong.
No, I think I agree with you.
But I mean, that'd be wishful thinking. So because I have the second floor meeting room here.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Sean forgot to take that up. And that concludes. Do we have? And I think that's the end of our presentation. Do you want to share?
Well, we have
the next meeting is going to focus on land use. Is that right?
Yes. Land use goals and policies.
So that'll be another interesting discussion.
It'll be, we're going to probably have similar format to what we've, this seemed to work out well. I want to thank everybody for just the collaboration, the thought that's gone into this review. I know it's a lot of details and a little bit tedious at times to try and get through it, but I really want to let you know how much we appreciate it, because this is the work that we need to finish up.
Yeah, absolutely. A much better document.
Okay,
Happy you guys get through with it. Seriously.
We have a motion from Member Simpson to adjourn, and I think I second that.
Yep.
Lena, send us home. All those votes to go home.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see you guys in March.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, and happy birthday tomorrow to Craig.
All right.
Aw. Thanks, gang.
That's right.
Thank you, Brandy. Thank you, Lena.
Thanks, everybody.
Happy
Good
New
luck,
Year.
Sean. Hope it works out.